My name is Claire. For the last 9 years, I've worked the night shift as a 911 dispatcher. It's not glamorous. It's not heroic. It's long stretches of silence broken by moments of pure panic. Most nights, it feels like I'm just waiting in a room full of ringing phones for other people's tragedies to arrive. You learn to keep your voice calm, no matter what's on the other end. Screaming mothers, drunk drivers, domestic fights, suicides. You don't get to be human on the line. You just listen. You take control. You guide them. That night, I thought it was just another shift. I thought it was the usual kind of loneliness, the kind you settle into when the sun sets and you know you'll be awake until dawn. But around midnight, I got a call that still lives in my head. The phone rang. I answered with the standard script. 911, what's your emergency? At first, I thought the line was dead. There was no voice, no background noise, just static. I almost hung up, but then I heard it, a whisper. So faint, I had to press the headset tighter against my ear. A string of soft, broken sounds, like someone was talking from a mile away, their mouth right up against the receiver, but their words drowned in breath. I tried again. 911. Can you repeat that? Hello? Can you tell me what's happening? No response. Just more whispers. I couldn't understand a single word. It wasn't clear speech. It was the shape of language, but muffled, like syllables slipping out before forming. My training told me to trace the call, to keep the line open as long as I could. But something about the sound unsettled me, because it felt familiar, not the words. I couldn't make out any words, but the cadence of it, the rhythm of breath between sounds, the way it lingered before speaking again. It was like hearing someone hum a tune you haven't heard in years, but still recognizing it. I told myself it was just the late hour, the static, my brain trying to find patterns where there weren't any. Still, I asked all the required questions. Was anyone hurt? Were they in danger? Could they press a key to respond if they couldn't speak? Nothing, just that whisper. And then, something changed. The sound grew sharper, closer to the microphone. Still not words, but the breathing between them turned uneven, shaky, almost wet. I muted my headset and flagged my supervisor, gesturing to trace the call. He nodded, typing on his console. I turned back to the line. Stay with me, okay? We're sending help. Just keep the phone on. Can you do that for me? The whisper paused, and then I heard a single sound, a faint syllable, drawn out. It almost sounded like my name. I froze. I wasn't sure. I couldn't have been sure. It was just a hiss of air, a broken consonant, but I swear, it sounded like Claire. My supervisor called out the trace result. He frowned. The call's coming from an unlisted number. Internal system ping only. No address. That didn't make sense. Every call had a source, even cell phones. You could at least pin it down to a tower. But this one, nothing. Just a void. I unmuted the headset. The whisper was still there, dragging, curling around syllables I couldn't catch. I pressed my pen so hard into my notepad that the tip snapped. Who is this? I asked, my voice sharper than it should have been. Do you need help? Tell me where you are. The whispering stopped. Dead silence. And then, after a long pause, I heard it again, a single word. Clear this time. Cold. The voice wasn't robotic. It wasn't distorted. It was human, low, fragile. It carried the kind of pain you only hear when someone's right on the edge of death. I felt my stomach twist. I told my supervisor. He shook his head, still trying to reroute the trace. Nothing. No location. I stayed on the line. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced my voice steady. Cold. Are you somewhere outside? Are you hurt? Please, you have to tell me where you are. The line crackled. Another whisper. But this one I recognized. It was a lullaby. My throat tightened, because my mother used to sing that to me when I was a child. The same melody, the same fragile hum, but my mother has been dead for 20 years. I ripped the headset away from my ear. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped it. I stared at the blinking red light of the call still connected. My supervisor asked if I was okay. I nodded too quickly. I didn't tell him what I'd heard. I forced myself to put the headset back on. The lullaby had stopped. The whispering had returned, soft and broken. I whispered back now. I don't know why, Maybe because I felt like I was talking to something fragile, something that would shatter if I raised my voice. "Who are you?" The whisper dragged on, and then a sound I'll never forget, a laugh. Not loud, not harsh, just a tiny, breathless laugh, almost childlike. But it echoed in a way that made my skin crawl, like the sound wasn't coming through the headset but seeping into the room itself. The line clicked, and the call ended. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sat frozen in my chair, the hum of the fluorescent lights above me suddenly too loud, the shadows in the corners of the dispatch room too deep. I told myself I'd imagined it. That exhaustion had twisted the call in my head. But when I checked the call log on my monitor, I found something worse. The call wasn't logged, there was no record of it ever happening, and yet, in the call duration field, where the system normally lists seconds and minutes, there was just one word: cold. I didn't sleep when I got home. I couldn't. I kept hearing the whispers, threading through the silence of my apartment. I kept remembering the way the voice had almost said my name, the way the lullaby matched the memory of my mother's voice. The next night, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe it had been some technical glitch, a trick of memory. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Because every time the phone rang after that, I hesitated. I waited for it. That same whisper dragging itself through the line, carrying pieces of me I thought I'd left buried in the past, and part of me is still waiting, every night, for the caller who already knows my name. I couldn't let it go. That call. The whispers. The word cold sitting in my call log where numbers should have been. It haunted me. Every time the phone rang after that night, I felt my stomach knot, expecting to hear that same faint breathing again. But the call never came back. Days passed. Then a week. The silence should have been a relief, but it only made me worse. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this job, it's that silence is never empty. Silence hides things. Silence waits. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The lullaby, the voice, the impossible trace. My supervisor chalked it up to a technical glitch, but I knew better. I had heard it. My mother's song, whispered through the line by someone I couldn't see. I told myself I should just move on. File it away as trauma or exhaustion, or a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But part of me couldn't, because deep down, I had the feeling whoever called wasn't finished with me. And then, something strange happened. A week after the call, I was cleaning out my locker at work when I noticed a piece of paper folded inside my jacket pocket. I don't remember putting it there. The paper was thin, soft from being handled too much. On it, in smudged pencil, was an address, an apartment building downtown. I stood there staring at it for a long time, my mouth dry. Because the address, I knew it. Not well, but enough. It was one of those places dispatchers knew by reputation, a crumbling block of concrete tucked between two boarded-up shops. We used to get calls from there all the time. Noise complaints, domestic fights, drugs. And then, about 2 years ago, the reports just stopped. When the city condemned the place, they moved everyone out. Nobody was supposed to live there anymore. And yet there it was. The address. In my jacket! Written by someone's hand, not mine. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown it away. But I didn't. Because when I saw those numbers written on the page, a single thought hit me so hard it made me shiver. This is where the call came from. The next night, I drove there. The building looked worse than I remembered. 6 stories of stained concrete, windows blackened with grime, the entryway sealed with a crooked piece of plywood someone had pried open long ago. A faded sign warned no trespassing, but the lock hung broken. The city had forgotten this place. It sat there rotting, a hollow shell. And yet, as I stood at the entrance, I felt the same pull I'd felt listening to the whisper through my headset. Like I was already inside, like the building had been waiting for me. The air smelled of mold and something sharper, something chemical that stung the back of my throat. The hall was lined with peeling wallpaper, its floral pattern curling like dried skin. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning under my weight. My flashlight beam slid across doors scarred with numbers half scratched away. Apartment 2A, 3C, 4D. All of them locked, but not solidly. Their wood was soft from rot. Their locks rusted. Their paint bubbled. And then, halfway up the 5th floor landing, I stopped because one of the doors was open. Just slightly, apartment 5B. The number had been carved into the wood with something sharp, as though someone had wanted to make sure it couldn't be erased. The door hung crooked and a faint draft leaked from the darkness inside. I should have left. I should have walked out of that place and never looked back. But something inside me whispered louder than my fear. This is it. This is where the call came from. I pushed the door open. The apartment smelled like dust, like damp wood. My light slid across a living room stripped of furniture. The wallpaper was the same faded pattern as the hallway, but here it was marked with dozens of small dark stains. I moved deeper inside. Every step echoed too loudly, bouncing off walls that felt closer than they should have been. The silence was unbearable, heavy. I could hear my own breathing like I was underwater. That's when I noticed signs of life. On the floor near the wall sat a bowl. A chipped porcelain bowl filled with something dry and gray. Cereal, maybe, though it looked fossilized. Beside it, a spoon rested in the dust. In the corner of the room lay a thin blanket, folded with care, as if someone had slept there not long ago. And above it, on the wall, something written in black marker. One word, over and over, cold. I stepped back, my chest tightening. The handwriting was frantic, slanted, pressed so deep into the wall the marker had torn the wallpaper. Cold, 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 cold. I lifted my flashlight higher. The word covered nearly the entire wall. Dozens of repetitions, overlapping, some scrawled larger, some smaller, spiraling into a black blur at the center. My throat went dry. I whispered to myself, "What the hell?" Then I heard it. A sound from the other room. Not loud, just a shuffle. Like a bare foot dragging lightly against the floor. I froze, light fixed on the doorway leading deeper inside. My body screamed to leave, but my feet betrayed me. Slowly, step by step, I crossed the room and pushed open the bedroom door. The air inside was colder, much colder, and on the floor, in the beam of my flashlight, I saw something that made my stomach clench. A phone. Not a cell phone. An old rotary landline phone, yellowed with age. Its cord stretched taut across the floor as though someone had dragged it there. The receiver lay off the hook. The sound I heard wasn't static. It wasn't footsteps. It was the faint hum of the phone line, alive, connected to nothing. And then, faintly through the receiver, I heard it again. A whisper. I don't know what it said. I don't even know if it was words. But the sound burrowed into my chest, dragging every hair on my arms upright. It was the exact same sound I'd heard that night at dispatch. I reached out, hesitating just inches from the phone. My hand shook so badly, the flashlight beam jittered across the walls. But I didn't pick it up, because on the wall beside the phone, scratched deep into the plaster, were more words, not written. Carved. Claire. My name. Dozens of times. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The beam swung wildly across the room, and for a split second I saw something in the corner. Not a person, not even a shape. Just the faint suggestion of movement, a darker shadow against the dark. I blinked. It was gone. The whisper on the receiver stopped. The hum fell silent, and the apartment felt empty again. But I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My name was on that wall, scratched by hands that knew me, waiting for me. I ran. Out of the bedroom, down the hall, through the lobby that smelled like rot and chemicals. I didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked and the headlights burning into the night. I sat there for a long time, shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't really seen it. that maybe someone had broken in, maybe kids, maybe squatters, maybe someone sick enough to carve names into plaster. But deep down, I knew. It was waiting for me. The call wasn't random, the whisper wasn't random. It had led me here, and it had shown me, without a doubt. It knew exactly who I was. I didn't go back to the apartment building, not right away, but it followed me. The memory of that place. The smell of mold and dust. My name carved over and over into plaster. The whisper on the phone that carried the same weight as the call I'd answered at work. It followed me into my apartment, into the quiet spaces where I should have felt safe. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that I'd been working too many overnight shifts, that exhaustion was twisting things in my head, but no amount of coffee or sleep could erase it. The silence in my apartment wasn't silence anymore. It felt like something was listening to me breathe. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a trick of the pipes. Old buildings groan, they sigh, they shift. But that night when I came home and tossed my keys on the counter, I froze halfway across the room. Because from down the hallway, I heard my own voice. Not loud. Just a whisper, repeating the same word I'd said seconds earlier. Home. The sound slithered out of the dark like a breath leaking from the walls. I spun around, heart hammering. And for a moment I thought maybe it was the neighbor's TV, some late-night program bleeding through the drywall. But it wasn't. It was my voice, the pitch, the rhythm, the hesitation on the H, exactly mine. I stood there for a long time, too afraid to move, staring into the hallway that led to my bedroom. Nothing stirred, nothing changed. Eventually, I forced myself to laugh under my breath, told myself it was just stress, just nerves, just a sound I misheard. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. My own voice, from the hallway, soft, crooked, like a recording being played back wrong. Cold. That word again. The same one whispered through the call. I spit toothpaste into the sink, foam dripping down my chin, staring at the mirror. The apartment behind me looked still. Too still. My reflection shook, trembling harder than I wanted to admit. I called out, "Hello?" And in the same instant, the voice in the hall answered, "Hello?" Exactly how I said it. Same pitch, same timing. I stumbled back, hitting the counter, knocking over a glass that shattered at my feet. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed as the silence stretched long. Nothing else came. No footsteps, no door creaks, just the empty hallway breathing my words back to me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the shadows pooling in the corners of the room. When dawn finally broke, I convinced myself again that it was nothing, that it had to be in my head. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't just echoes. It was learning me. The days blurred. At work, I made mistakes I never made before. Logged numbers wrong, fumbled addresses. My supervisor warned me to take a break, but I couldn't. I was terrified of the silence waiting at home. And then one night, while I was logging reports, a sound leaked into my headset. Not static, not a caller, but my own voice, whispering from the line. Not through the speaker, but through the headset itself, vibrating against my ear. At first it was faint, like a breath caught between wires. But then I heard it clearly. Claire. My name. Said exactly how I say it when I introduced myself. I ripped the headset off, tossed it on the desk. My supervisor glanced over, but I didn't explain. How could I? That the line was mimicking me? That my voice was bleeding into the system? I left work early that night. I couldn't stop shaking. When I got home, I checked every inch of my apartment. Every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. But the air in the hallway felt wrong. Thicker somehow. I tried to sleep, but around 3 in the morning I woke to the sound of someone whispering right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, listening. It was my voice again, repeating a dream I'd had seconds earlier. Every word I'd muttered in my sleep, it was out there saying back to me. A broken, delayed recording. I curled under the blanket, heart in my throat, too afraid to move. The whisper went on for hours, never stopping, never stumbling, just feeding me back to myself. By the time the sun came up, the voice was gone. But the feeling it left behind stayed. That hallway wasn't just a hallway anymore. It was a mouth, a throat, and whatever was inside it had swallowed my words whole. I started leaving for work. Early, coming home late, anything to avoid being in that apartment longer than I had to. But the voice followed me. In the stairwell at work, I heard my own laugh echoing 2 flights below. In the grocery store, as I whispered my list to myself, I heard the same words slip back from the next aisle. Even in my car, I swore I heard myself, humming under the static of the radio long after I'd stopped. I was unraveling. One night, I decided to test it. I stood in the hallway of my apartment, all the lights off except one lamp flickering in the living room. My voice shook as I whispered a single word, "Stop." For a moment, nothing. And then, from the shadows at the far end of the hall, "Stop." My voice, exactly mine. I whispered again. "Who are you?" The dark breathed it back. "Who are you?" My chest tightened. I stepped forward. "Why are you here?" The answer came faster this time, overlapping mine like it was eager. "Why are you here?" I stumbled back, pulse pounding in my ears. My throat closed up as the air grew colder, heavy with something I couldn't see but felt pressing in. I whispered, "What do you want?" And this time, it didn't echo. This time, the hallway answered with its own words, not mine. Cold. I froze. Every part of me wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The word hung in the air, heavy, final, as if the building itself had spoken. I backed into the living room, my hands shaking so violently I could barely keep hold of my phone. I tried to dial someone, anyone, but the screen glitched, the numbers scrambling as if the device itself was infected. I dropped it on the couch, staring at the dark mouth of the hallway, waiting for another sound. But nothing came. Just silence. I left the apartment at dawn, bags under my eyes, hands trembling so badly I could barely lock the door. I went to work, but I wasn't really there. Every sound felt wrong. Every word I spoke felt stolen the second it left my mouth. By the end of the shift, I knew I couldn't keep living like this, so I made a choice. I was going back to that apartment building, the one with my name carved into its walls, the place where the call had led me. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't just following me. It was tied to that place, to that phone, to something I had already touched and left unfinished. And deep down, in the sickest part of me, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wanted answers, even if I didn't survive them. I thought I could handle it. I thought going back to the abandoned apartment would give me answers. Some kind of closure, but it didn't. It only made things worse. Ever since that night, the voices haven't stopped. Not the whispers. Not the echoes. They follow me everywhere now. It doesn't matter if I'm in my apartment, my car, or at the dispatch center. Every time I speak, I feel it. Like my words are stolen the second they leave my mouth, swallowed up by something I can't see. And lately, it's getting louder. Not whispers anymore. Not faint echoes. Screams, not mine. Not anyone else's. Just raw, broken sounds that tear through my head until I can't think straight. I hear them when I try to sleep, when I eat, when I talk. I hear them in the silence between calls. Sometimes I swear they're buried under the voices of the real people I answer, like they're hiding in the background, waiting for me to notice. But what scares me most is that it feels like they're coming from closer and closer, not from my headset, not from the walls of my apartment. But from right behind me, I don't turn around anymore, because I know if I do, I'll see it. I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't real, that it was my mind breaking down under stress, hallucinations, trauma. I tried every excuse I could find. But then last night, something happened at work that I can't explain away. It started the same as always. A quiet night. Phones silent for long stretches, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the room. I was half asleep at my console when the line lit up. I answered the way I always do. 9-1, what's your emergency? Silence. My chest tightened. I knew that silence. I pressed the headset closer to my ear, praying it wasn't what I thought it was. Then the whispers came, the same broken sounds, the same wet breathing. Only this time, it wasn't faint. It was loud, right in my ear. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. Who is this? Where are you calling from? The whisper dragged out longer, heavier. It bent the air around me, made my skin crawl. And then I heard it. Not just words, screams. Hundreds of them, all layered together, fighting to be heard through the line. High-pitched, low male, female, child, all at once. The sound was so violent I tore the headset away, but I could still hear it. Not through the speakers, through the room itself. The walls shook with it, vibrating with every shriek. My supervisor looked over, confused, but when I stared at him, I realized he didn't hear it. He just saw me frozen in my chair, pale and shaking. The screams were mine alone. I forced the headset back on, hoping, praying it would stop. And when I did, the chaos cut out. One voice remained, calm, clear, my own. It whispered my name, Claire. I couldn't breathe. My throat locked up, my fingers digging into the edge of the desk until my nails bent back. I wanted to rip the headset off again, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't let me. The voice spoke again. Behind you. Every muscle in me tensed. My vision blurred. I wanted to turn around to prove there was nothing there. But some part of me knew, if I did, it would all be over, I whispered. What do you want? And the voice answered perfectly in my own tone. To come home. The call cut out. The line went dead, but the silence that followed was worse, because it wasn't empty silence. It was waiting. I yanked off the headset, stumbling to my feet. My supervisor asked if I was okay, but his voice felt far away, like I was underwater. I left the dispatch center, not even clocking out, and sat in my car, shaking until dawn. I told myself I wouldn't go back, that I'd quit if I had to. But tonight, when I walked in, I knew it wasn't that simple. Because the moment I stepped into the dispatch room, I felt it. Something was already here. The air was heavy, thick, colder than it should have been. The lights buzzed too loudly, flickering at the edges of my vision. And the silence between the phones ringing wasn't silence anymore. It was breathing. Not mine. Not anyone else's. Theirs. I tried to ignore it, to lose myself in the routine. But an hour into the shift, the line lit up again. I answered. My voice shook. 1-1, what's your emergency? This time, the voice came instantly. Not a whisper. Not faint. A scream. It ripped through the headset so violently I nearly fell out of my chair. I pulled the mic away, but the scream didn't stop. It drilled straight into my skull, filling every inch of me. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The scream wasn't in the headset anymore. It was in the room. It was inside me. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I sat there gasping, sweat dripping down my face, praying it was over. But then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. Not mine this time. My mother's. She whispered the same lullaby she used to sing to me as a child. The same one I heard on that first call. I stared at the dead line, tears burning my eyes. My mother has been gone for 20 years, but the voice was hers. Perfectly hers, and then layered under it. My own voice again, whispering with her, singing with her. Both of us, echoing together, tangled so tightly I couldn't tell which one was me anymore. I ripped the headset off and threw it across the room. The sound didn't stop. It was coming from everywhere now. From the walls, from the floor, from the other headsets resting on empty desks. And then, from the hallway outside, I froze. Because I could hear footsteps. Slow. Careful. Coming closer. The singing stopped. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, and then from the darkness of the hall, I heard it, my own voice. Clear, steady, let me in. I stared at the door, every nerve in my body screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The voice came again, closer this time. I'm cold. The door handle rattled, and suddenly, all the headsets on every desk lit up at once, ringing together in a deafening chorus. The room pulsed with light, the air vibrating with screams and whispers, and my own voice layered over itself 1,000 times. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And in that chaos, I realized something. The call wasn't coming from outside anymore. It wasn't from some abandoned apartment. It wasn't from the city. It was inside the dispatch center. It was inside the walls, inside the wires, inside me. The door burst open, and in the darkness beyond, I swear I saw it. A figure. Not quite me, not quite anyone else. A shape made of static and breath and broken syllables. Its mouth opened wide, and my own voice poured out, screaming. I shut my eyes, clamped my hands over my ears, and prayed it would stop. But even now, as I sit here trying to tell this story, I can still hear it. The whisper, the scream, the voice that knows my name, and I know. It won't ever leave me, because once you answer the call, you can never hang up. I still remember the call that night, the kind of call that doesn't leave you, no matter how many others you take afterward. I was a 911 operator back then. You get used to strange voices. You get used to drunk arguments, confused elderly people, kids playing pranks. After a while, even real emergencies blur together. Fires, heart attacks, burglaries. They all carry the same rhythm of panic. But this one was different. The line clicked open, and at first all I heard was breathing. Shaky, uneven. A man's voice, low, like he was trying not to be heard. And what's your emergency? I asked, my voice steady, automatic. He whispered back, I can't find her. Who? My wife. She was just here. In the house. And now, she's gone. It sounded like he was speaking through his teeth, fighting to stay calm. I straightened in my chair, pen already in hand. Okay, sir, I need you to slow down. What's your name? Daniel. His voice cracked a little. My name is Daniel Hale. My wife's name is Claire. I scribbled the names down. All right, Daniel. Tell me exactly what happened. He hesitated. Then, almost in a rush, we were watching TV. She went upstairs to get a blanket. She didn't come back. I went up there and... His breath hitched. She wasn't there. The bedroom was empty. I checked every room, every closet. She's gone. Gone? Do you mean she left the house? No. He sounded offended, almost panicked. No, the doors are locked. The windows, too. There's nowhere she could have gone. She was just gone. My first thought was a domestic fight, maybe a cover story. But there was something in his voice. A raw confusion. A fear that didn't sound rehearsed. All right, Daniel, I said carefully. What's the address? And that's when the night stopped being normal. He gave me the address, numbers, street name, even the zip code. I typed it into the system. Nothing came up. I tried again. Still nothing. I checked the county map, the city records. There was no house there. No property listed. Just an empty lot, if anything. Sir, I said slowly, can you confirm the address? He repeated it, almost shouting this time. That's my house! We've lived here 6 years. Please, just send someone. She's gone! I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. Sometimes we get calls from outside our jurisdiction, but even then, there's always something. A marker, a record. But this, it was like he was giving me an address that had been erased. Still, protocol is protocol. Stay on the line, I told him. I'm dispatching officers to your location, but when I tried to, the system froze. The street didn't exist on their maps either. I muted my headset, calling over to my supervisor. Hey, can you run an override on this? The address isn't registering. He frowned, leaned over, checked my screen. That's not a valid street. You sure you didn't type it wrong? I didn't, I said. My throat felt dry. He double-checked. Same result. Nothing. Sir, I said back into the headset, we're having trouble locating your address. Are you sure you gave it to me correctly? Silence. Then, why are you asking me that? I just want to make sure we get someone to you. A pause. His breathing quickened. You don't know where I am, do you? The way he said it, like he'd just realized something, sent a chill through me. I tried again, asking him for landmarks, cross streets, anything. He described houses, neighbors, a church down the block. But when I pulled up that street on satellite view, it was just an overgrown field. No houses, no church, nothing. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice calm. Are you sure you're at home right now? He laughed. But it wasn't relief. It was brittle, breaking. Of course I'm at home. I'm sitting in my living room. The TV's still on. My wife's mug is still on the coffee table. But she's not here. The call went silent for a moment. I thought maybe he'd hung up. Then I heard it, a faint creak, like floorboards shifting under weight. Wait, he whispered. There's someone upstairs. My chest tightened. Daniel, do not go up there, I told him quickly. Stay where you are until officers arrive. But there wouldn't be officers. Not if the house didn't exist. I have to, he whispered. It could be her. I heard his footsteps climbing stairs. Each one heavier, slower, like he was forcing himself forward. Daniel, keep talking to me. He didn't answer. Just breathing. Then a door creaked open. Silence. Daniel, I said. His voice came back, faint, trembling. This isn't my house. I froze. What do you mean? The hallway. The wallpaper. The pictures. None of this is ours. I don't... His breath caught. I don't know where I am. Static filled the line. I thought I'd lost him. Then, suddenly, a sound I'll never forget. A woman's voice, soft, distant. Daniel. I sat up straight. Was that your wife? But Daniel's voice was broken, terrified. That's not her. The line went dead. I tried to call back. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. My supervisor asked what happened. I told him. He looked uneasy, but all he said was, mark it as a dropped call. I didn't. I kept the paper with his name and the address he gave me. I wrote it all down, because something about that call didn't feel like a prank. It felt real. Too real. And the thing that still haunts me. The next morning I drove out there. To the place where his house was supposed to be. It was empty land. Just weeds, dirt, and broken concrete. No houses. No streets. Nothing. But as I stood there, I swear I could feel something watching me. Like the space itself remembered him. And for just a second I thought I heard it too. A woman's voice. Soft. Distant. Calling from nowhere. Daniel. I didn't sleep after that call. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. The way it cracked when he said, "This isn't my house." And that woman's whisper carried through dead static like it was never meant for me. But I'd heard it anyway. By morning, I told myself it had to be a glitch. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was delusional. Maybe the system was out of sync. But I kept thinking about the way he whispered her name. About the sound of someone moving upstairs. That wasn't the kind of detail you invent mid-panic. I should have let it go. Logged it as a dropped call, just like my supervisor said. But instead, I started digging. I ran the number again. The caller ID came up blank. No registered user, no carrier data, nothing. Almost like it wasn't a real phone. I checked the address he gave me against older maps, archived city records. Nothing. The street name didn't exist in any official database. It was as if it had been erased. By the time my next shift came around, the unease had grown into something heavier. I couldn't sit there with the memory pressing down on me. So when I heard 2 officers were being sent to follow up, I volunteered to ride along. Dispatchers don't usually do field work, but I told them I needed to observe. Maybe part of me wanted answers. Maybe part of me wanted to prove I wasn't losing my mind. It was late evening when we left. Officer Mallory drove. Officer Finch rode shotgun. I sat in the back, radio in hand, the address Daniel had given me scribbled on a slip of paper. The sky was low and gray, clouds sitting heavy like the day hadn't fully woken up. We followed the county road out past the limits of town. At first it was familiar. Gas stations, strip malls, old farmhouses collapsing into themselves. But as we pressed farther out, the land turned emptier. Just patches of woods and wide open fields stretching in every direction. And then the fog rolled in. It wasn't gradual. One minute the air was clear. The next we were swallowed by it. Thick and pale like a curtain dropping across the road. Mallory slowed down, headlights carving weak tunnels through the white. "What the hell?" Finch muttered. "Forecast didn't say anything about fog tonight." No one answered. The silence sat heavy. The fog wasn't normal. It didn't move with the wind. It didn't thin out as we drove. It just hung there, dense and endless. The world shrank to 20 feet in every direction. I clutched the slip of paper tighter. The address should be close. Keep going. But something was wrong with the road itself. I glanced out the window and saw shapes in the fog. Fences, trees, houses maybe, but they flickered. 1 second they were there. The next, gone. Like they were being swallowed whole. Or like the fog was spitting out fragments of another place entirely. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice too sharp. Neither officer answered. But I could tell by the way Mallory gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, that he saw it too. The GPS lost signal a mile back. The radio hissed with static. Even the compass on the dashboard spun once before freezing south. We drove slower. The tires hummed over pavement that felt too smooth, too new, like we weren't on county roads anymore. I kept glancing at the mile markers, but they didn't make sense. We passed one that said 14, then 22, then 9. "Turn around," I whispered before I even realized I'd spoken. "Something's wrong." Mallory shook his head. "We're almost there, but where was there?" I looked down at the paper again. The numbers and street names stared back at me, but they felt heavier now, like I wasn't holding just ink on paper, but a key. A key to something that wasn't supposed to be opened. "Stop!" Finch's voice was tight. "Do you hear that?" We all went silent. At first, it was just the idle purr of the cruiser. Then I heard it. A faint hum, low, vibrating through the fog like a living thing. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was tonal, like a single note being held in the air, stretched so thin it became a part of everything. Mallory slowed the car to a crawl. The hum grew louder, and then, just barely visible through the fog, a shape took form. A house, old, 2 stories, weather-beaten siding. Windows dark, my breath caught. The address was real. Mallory killed the engine. The silence that followed felt wrong, like the hum had only been covering up something deeper, something waiting underneath. We sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield. The house loomed not quite clear, like it was half-formed, still sinking in and out of the fog. "This shouldn't be here," I whispered. Finch glanced back at me. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. "I came out here yesterday. There was nothing. Just dirt and weeds. No one moved." Finally, Mallory opened his door. "Stay here," he muttered. He stepped out, flashlight in hand, beam cutting through the white. Finch followed. Against everything in me screaming not to, I climbed out too. The fog pressed heavy against my skin, damp and cold. It smelled faintly of earth. But underneath there was another smell, something metallic, almost like rust. The closer we walked, the more wrong it felt. The air grew still. The hum vibrated through the ground. And then, faintly, I thought I heard something else. A voice. Not clear. Just a murmur stretched and broken by the fog. "Daniel!" I froze. My stomach dropped. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Neither officer answered. But their flashlights trembled slightly. The front steps of the house creaked as we climbed them. The wood was soft, waterlogged. The door stood slightly open, swaying just enough to reveal blackness inside. Mallory called out. "Sheriff's Department, hello?" No answer. We waited. And in that silence, I swear the fog itself seemed to lean closer, pressing against us, listening. Something about stepping inside felt final, like crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But Mallory pushed the door open anyway. The house breathed out a draft of cold air. And as it washed over me, I realized the smell wasn't just rust. It was old blood. I didn't want to go inside. Every part of me screamed to run. But I followed them anyway, because somewhere in that house I knew was the truth about Daniel. And maybe the truth about the place itself. The house was colder than I expected. Not the kind of cold you get from weather or a draft slipping through broken windows. It was heavier than that. Like stepping into a basement where the air never moves, where time itself goes stale. The 3 of us stood in the doorway, flashlights sweeping across the entry. Dust drifted through the beams, catching in the glow. The floor groaned beneath our weight. each step sounding louder than it should have, like the house wanted us to know we didn't belong. Mallory cleared his throat. "Sheriff's Department. Anyone inside?" Silence. But silence in that house didn't feel empty. It felt loaded, like something was waiting for us to move deeper. We split up without saying much. Finch went toward the back, Mallory to the stairs, and I stayed in the living room. The wallpaper was peeling, patterned with faded flowers. There were picture frames on the walls, but the glass was cracked, and the photos inside had turned pale. The faces smudged out like water had seeped into the paper. I kept staring at them, trying to make out details. A woman with long hair, a man in a suit, maybe kids, though their shapes were too blurred to be sure. Every time I thought I recognized something, an outline of a smile, the edge of an eye, the image seemed to slip away, like it was erasing itself as I looked. I turned from the wall. The TV in the corner sat dark, screen reflecting my flashlight. The coffee table was there too, and on it a mug. Just like Daniel had said, I froze. The mug wasn't dusty. It wasn't cracked or yellowed with age like everything else. It was clean, as if someone had set it down minutes ago. My throat went dry. "Mallory," I called out softly. "Come look at this." No answer. I took a step toward the stairs, meaning to call again, but that's when I saw it. Movement. In the window across the room, just above the reflection of my light, I saw a face, white, hollow, pressed against the glass from outside. Watching me, I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The beam swung wildly across the room. Nothing. The window was empty. I told myself it was my own reflection, warped by the glass. But deep down, I knew what I saw. A face. Staring in. "Finch?" Mallory's voice echoed from upstairs. "You hear that?" My heart pounded. I ran toward the staircase, and that's when Finch came rushing back into the hall, pale, breathless. "There was someone at the back door," he said. His voice was shaking. "I swear it." Shadow moved across the glass. We all froze there in the hall, each of us knowing we'd seen something, but none of us wanting to say it out loud. Mallory finally muttered, "Stay sharp," and headed back up the stairs. I followed. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom. The steps creaked under my weight, louder than before. It felt like the house was testing each one, measuring us. The upstairs hallway was narrow, the wallpaper darker here, stained with spreading watermarks that looked almost like faces themselves. Stretched. Screaming, we opened doors one by one, bedrooms, closets, bathrooms, all empty. Yet every time we entered a room, I felt the same thing, like someone had just stepped out. The air still carried the shape of presence, and the silence trembled with it. Then in the last room at the end of the hall, we found it. The window. Its glass fogged over from the inside, smeared with something oily, and on that glass, pressed in clear outlines, were marks, handprints, dozens of them. Some small like children, some larger. Palms flat against the window pane, fingers stretched, overlapping, and in between them, faint impressions. Faces, not detailed, not like a photograph. Just the blur of mouths, cheeks, hollow eyes pressed close to the glass, staring in. Finch swore under his breath and stepped back. Mallory shined his light closer. The impressions didn't fade. They weren't illusions. They were there, marked into the condensation. I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the spot, because I knew, deep in my chest, that these weren't old stains. They were fresh. I whispered without meaning to. "They've been watching us." Mallory jerked the curtain closed, his jaw tight. "Let's check the basement. Then we're done here." I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to leave right then, run out of that house and never look back. But my mouth wouldn't open. The basement door was narrow, tucked behind the kitchen. The smell hit us first when we pulled it open. Wet wood, rot, and something else. That metallic tang again. The steps down were steep. Our lights cut across stone walls slick with moisture. The hum we'd heard outside was louder here, vibrating faintly under our feet. The basement was nearly empty. Just concrete, dirt, and the shape of old support beams. But across the far wall, windows small, ground level, half buried in soil. And every single one of them had a face, not pressed in like the upstairs window. Not smudged impressions. Actual shapes. Pale, gray, eyes too wide, mouths too still, dozens of faces in the glass, all staring in. I felt my stomach turn. I staggered back, choking on air. Finch dropped his flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, flickering shadows. For a moment, I swore the faces moved, shifting closer. Mallory shouted, "Who's there?" His voice cracked, but no one answered. And then, as sudden as they'd come, the faces were gone. The windows showed only dirt, smeared with condensation. "Empty again!" Finch scrambled to pick up his light, muttering curses under his breath. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt locked, my heart pounding too fast. Mallory looked at us both, his face pale. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again. We left the basement in silence. When we reached the front hall again, the air felt different, thicker. The house seemed darker, as though the little light we carried was being swallowed. I glanced at the window one last time, and there it was again. A face. Just one this time. A woman's hollow eyes, mouth curved into something too close to a smile, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. We didn't speak on the way out. We didn't even look at each other. The only sound was the floor groaning under our steps, the front door opening into the fog, and the cold air rushing out with us, like the house had been holding its breath. Outside, the cruiser waited. The fog was thicker than before, wrapping around the car like it had been waiting for us too. Mallory locked the doors as soon as we climbed in. His hands shook on the wheel. None of us said it out loud, but we all knew the same thing. The house wasn't empty. It was watching. I told myself we wouldn't go back inside, not after the faces, not after that basement. But the truth is, once you step into a place like that, it doesn't really let you go. You can walk out the door, you can breathe in the cold air, you can sit in the safety of a locked car, but some part of you stays trapped inside. That's what it felt like when Mallory started the engine. The cruiser's headlights pushed against the fog, but the house still loomed behind us, pale and silent. I could feel its pull, like gravity, dragging us back. None of us spoke for a while. Finch sat stiff in the passenger seat, jaw tight, knuckles pale where he gripped the dash. Mallory's face was unreadable, but I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. I kept staring at the house in the rearview mirror. And then, before I could stop myself, I said the worst possible thing. What if Daniel's wife is still in there? The words hung heavy. No one wanted to answer, but the silence was worse than any reply, because it meant we were all thinking the same thing. Finally, Mallory swore under his breath, slammed the gear into park, and killed the engine. "We're not leaving until we know," I should have argued. I should have begged them not to go back in, but something in me needed answers too. Needed to know what this place really was. So we went back. The door groaned shut behind us, and the air inside seemed colder than before, damp with a smell that clung to my skin. The flashlight beams quivered across the walls, tracing the peeling paper, the warped floors. We moved through the rooms again, slower this time, more careful. Every corner felt like it was waiting. Every window felt like an eye. Then we found it. At the end of the upstairs hall, a door stood half open. But I knew it hadn't been there before. I'd walked that hallway twice already. There had been 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a closet. Not this. The door was narrow, its wood darker than the others, like it had been hidden behind the wall and only now revealed itself. Mallory pushed it open. The room inside was wrong. At first glance, it was just another bedroom. 4 walls, a bed in the corner, a dresser, a small window. But something about the proportions didn't sit right. The ceiling felt too low, the walls too close. The space itself seemed to lean inward, pressing around us. Finch muttered, "This wasn't here before." Mallory stepped inside. "We'll check it." Quick look, I didn't want to. Every nerve in me screamed to stay out, but I followed anyway. The floor creaked. The air was heavy, like breathing through cloth. The wallpaper here was striped, but the stripes didn't line up properly. They bent at strange angles, curving into corners that didn't make sense. I glanced back at the door. It had shifted. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough that I noticed. The room seemed smaller now. The ceiling lower. Do you feel that? I whispered. Finch looked around, eyes wide. It's shrinking. Mallory's light swept across the dresser. Its shape was wrong, too. At one angle, it was tall and narrow. From another, it looked squat and wide. Like the room itself couldn't decide how it wanted to be. And then the door closed. Not slammed. Not pushed, just closed, slow and final. Mallory rushed to it, tried the knob. It didn't budge. It stuck, he grunted, yanking harder. I pressed my back to the wall, heart hammering. The room felt tighter by the second. The ceiling was almost brushing my head now, though I knew that wasn't possible. The air grew hotter, then colder, then thick like syrup. The wallpaper stripes seemed to writhe, curling into shapes. Faces, mouths opening where there had only been lines. I shut my eyes. But that was worse, because the second I did, I felt the floor shift under me. Tilt, like the whole room was rotating. I opened them again and nearly screamed. The bed wasn't in the corner anymore. It was against the opposite wall. The dresser, too, had moved, though I hadn't seen it happen. The window was gone completely. Finch was breathing fast. This isn't possible. This isn't possible. Mallory slammed his shoulder into the door again and again, but the wood didn't crack. The knob didn't rattle. It was like the door was part of the wall itself. I pressed my hands against the striped paper, searching for seams, for anything solid. The wall felt soft. Too soft. Like the surface of wet clay, and then it moved under my touch. Something pushed back. I jerked away, stomach lurching. My palm carried the faint warmth of what I'd touched. Skin. Don't! Finch gasped. His flashlight beam shook violently, darting across the warped room. The stripes writhed faster now. Shapes pushing out from beneath. Hands. Faces. Fingers stretching, pressing against the thin skin of the wall, and every one of them whispered. Not loud. Not words. Just breath. 1,000 tiny breaths against the plaster, hissing through the room. Mallory bellowed, "Enough!" and smashed his flashlight against the knob. The metal bent but didn't break. His breath came heavy, sweat dripping down his temple. The floor lurched sideways. The room tilted. We stumbled, slamming into the dresser, which toppled over and slid toward the wall, only the wall didn't stop it. The dresser sank halfway into the plaster like it was swallowed. Drawers yawning open before the wood vanished completely. I choked on bile. "It's eating the room!" The ceiling pressed lower, bending toward us, striped paper stretching tight like skin over bone. Finch dropped to his knees, clawing at the floorboards, his voice breaking. "We're not getting out! We're not getting out!" I grabbed him, shaking hard. "Look at me! Look at me!" His eyes met mine, wide, glassy. "We're getting out," I said. I didn't believe it. But I had to say it. Mallory roared again and slammed his whole weight against the door. This time the wood cracked. A jagged splinter tore through the frame. The room screamed. That's the only way I can describe it. Not with mouths, not with sound exactly, but with every surface. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. They all shrieked at once, vibrating with fury. The floor buckled, pitching us toward the wall. The striped paper split open, and for a second, I saw what was underneath. Not wood, not plaster. Flesh. Living flesh. Pale and pulsing, veins throbbing beneath a thin membrane. Faces stretched across it, eyes bulging, mouths opening in silent screams. I gagged, dragging Finch back. Mallory smashed the door again. Splinters flying, finally, with a deafening crack. It burst open. We tumbled into the hall. Gasping, the room behind us convulsing, shifting, pulling back into itself. When I looked again, the door was gone, nothing but wallpaper, as if the room had never existed. We lay there on the floor, shaking, barely able to breathe. My flashlight rolled in a circle, beam trembling across the ceiling. None of us spoke. We couldn't, because we all knew what we'd seen. The house wasn't just watching us, it was alive. I don't remember running down the stairs. I don't remember bursting out the front door, or how the fog swallowed us again. All I remember is the sound, that shriek the house made when we broke free of that room. The way it filled my bones like something had scraped them hollow just to echo inside. The cruiser was still there. Parked in the same place, headlights off, black and silent. For a moment, it felt like safety. Like a piece of the real world waiting for us. We didn't make it that far. Because when we turned back, the house wasn't the same anymore. It was taller, wider. Its windows glared like open wounds, shifting, bending, the whole structure swelling as if it were breathing. The fog clung to its frame, shivering each time the house exhaled. Finch whispered, "We have to go, now!" We ran. Our boots pounded against the warped boards of the porch, down the steps across the ground. But the fog thickened, pulling tighter. The space stretching and twisting until the cruiser didn't seem closer, but farther away. I looked over my shoulder. That was my mistake. In the upstairs window, I saw a figure. A man, hands pressed to the glass. His mouth opening and closing over and over, but no sound carried out. Daniel. I stumbled, breath tearing from my chest. Finch grabbed my arm, pulled me forward, but Mallory was already ahead. And then, he wasn't. 1 second, Mallory was sprinting toward the cruiser. The next, the fog folded over him and he was gone. Not running ahead, not falling behind. Just gone. Finch and I skidded to a stop. My flashlight cut wild circles through the white searching. "Mallory!" I shouted. My voice cracked. No answer. Finch spun in place, panic rising. "Where is he? Where the hell?" And then I watched Finch disappear too. It didn't happen fast. It was slower, crueler. His outline wavered like heat above asphalt. His arms reached for me, his mouth opening to scream, but the fog swallowed his body in strips, piece by piece. First his legs, then his chest. His face was the last to go, wide with terror, lips shaping my name before nothing remained. And I was alone. The silence afterward was unbearable. I spun in circles, light flashing through the endless fog. My chest heaved, my throat tight with bile. The cruiser was gone. The path was gone. There was nothing left but white, and the house. Always the house. It loomed just behind me, closer than it should have been, windows staring like eyes. I couldn't tell if it had moved or if I had. The fog made every step feel wrong, like space itself bent in circles. I didn't want to go back inside. But there was nowhere else, so I did. The door groaned open as if it had been waiting. The air rushed out, swallowing me whole. Inside, the house was darker than before. The flashlight felt weaker, its beam thinning against the shadows. The walls seemed farther apart now, then closer, shifting when I wasn't looking. I called out their names. "Mallory! Finch!" My voice echoed back wrong, twisted, as though someone else were mocking me in the dark. Room by room, I searched. Every corner hummed with memory, the mug still on the table. The wallpaper faces shifting in the hall, the upstairs landing where the hidden door had been. But there was no one. And then faintly, I heard it. A voice. Soft. Distant. Daniel. My skin crawled. The sound came from everywhere at once. From the walls, from the floor, from the very air. It wasn't calling to him anymore. It was calling to me. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it seeped through anyway, vibrating inside my skull. I staggered down the hall, breathing ragged, and found myself at the basement door again. I didn't want to open it. God, I didn't. But my hand turned the knob on its own. The smell hit first. Stronger now. Rust and earth and something sour, like rot. The steps groaned under my weight, leading me down into that hollow dark. The windows were still there. But now, the faces weren't outside looking in. They were inside, pressed against the glass from my side, staring out into the dirt beyond. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. Their eyes rolled back white, mouths frozen in open screams, and one of them was Finch. His face, pale, distorted by the curve of the glass. His hands flat against it, fingers splayed. His mouth open in a silent cry. I stumbled back, tripping over myself, flashlight shaking. The beam swept across the other windows. Mallory, his face too, twisted, lips pulled back from his teeth. Eyes wide, desperate, I screamed until my throat tore raw. The sound vanished into the house, eaten by its walls. The flashlight flickered, dimmed. For a moment, I stood in near blackness, the hum vibrating deeper, crawling up through my bones. And then I realized something that froze me solid. There was another face in the glass. Not Daniel, not Mallory, not Finch, me. My own reflection, pressed against the window from inside, staring back at myself. Its mouth opened when mine didn't, a silent mockery. Lips curling into a grin I couldn't feel. The light went out. Darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. Time didn't exist anymore. Just the dark and the hum and the press of walls too close. When the light finally flickered back, weak and sputtering, I wasn't in the basement anymore. I was in the living room. The mug was still on the table. The TV reflected my own pale face back at me, but the house was different again. The walls bent at strange angles, hallways leading where they shouldn't, doors opening into places that didn't exist. Every room I stepped into dissolved into another. No exits, no windows. Just endless corridors folding into themselves. The house was a maze, a trap, and I was the last one left inside. I don't know when I stopped searching for the others. Maybe after the third or fourth loop through the same hallway. Maybe after the doors began leading to nowhere but more doors. Maybe after I started hearing footsteps following mine but never catching up. I began to wonder if I'd ever left dispatch that night. If I was still sitting at my desk, headset buzzing, Daniel's voice trembling in my ear. This isn't my house. Maybe it never was his. Maybe it was always mine. The faces in the walls whispered, shifting under the paper, their mouths brushing close against my ears. I stopped fighting. I stopped running. I just listened. Because in the dark, in the endless hallways, in the maze of rooms that breathe and walls that move, it doesn't matter what's real anymore. What matters is that the house wants me. And I think it always did. I still remember the sound, not the ringing phone, not the usual chatter of voices on the radio, just the sound that came after. Static. I'd been working as a 911 dispatcher for 5 years at that point. It wasn't glamorous. Most nights were the same. Drunk drivers, noise complaints, sometimes a real emergency if the city decided to wake up. My job was to stay calm, take details, and pass them along. Keep people grounded until help arrived. That was the rule. That night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you notice every tick of the wall clock and every hum of the fluorescent lights above your head. I remember leaning back in my chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, when the phone lit up. 911, what's your emergency? My voice was automatic, trained. At first, there was nothing. Just silence. I thought maybe it was a butt dial, or maybe the line had dropped. I waited. My finger hovered over the button to disconnect. That's when it started, a soft crackle. Like when you turn an old radio dial between stations. The line wasn't dead, it was breathing. Alive somehow. Hello? I asked again, a little sharper this time. The static grew louder. I turned down my headset, frowning. It wasn't normal interference. This wasn't just noise. There were patterns in it, like someone whispering through the fuzz. I leaned closer to the mic. Ma'am, sir, if you can hear me, I need you to say something. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint, buried in the static, but there. Words wrapped in distortion, fighting to break free. It said my name. Not dispatcher. Not hello. My actual name. Daniel. I froze. Callers didn't know my name. They weren't supposed to. The console only showed operator on their end. No one could know who I was. I swallowed hard. Who is this? The voice cut in again, broken and stuttering, but clear enough. You shouldn't be here. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself it was a prank. God knows people love to waste our time. But the way it said it, low, distorted, dragging every syllable out, it didn't sound like a prank. Look, this line is for emergencies only, I snapped, trying to sound firm. If this is a joke, it isn't funny. I will trace this call. The static rose up, hissing like something alive. Then, just as suddenly, it fell quiet. Dead air. I pulled off my headset, rubbed my eyes. Maybe it was a glitch. We had those sometimes. Crossed lines, bad signals. It didn't explain the voice, but it was the only thing that made sense. I logged the call as inaudible. Standard procedure. My fingers shook as I typed, though I didn't admit that to myself. Not even 10 minutes later, the phone lit up again. Same number. My throat went dry. I almost didn't answer. But training kicked in. I had to. 911, what's your emergency? Static. Then the voice, this time louder. Closer. Daniel. I sat there frozen, headset pressing against my ears. The voice was wrong. It was using my name like it had known me all my life. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. Male, maybe. Young. Who are you? My voice cracked despite me trying to stay professional. You know me, it said. And the way it said it, I swear, for half a second I thought I did know it. I searched my memory, flipping through old faces, old friends, anyone who could have been messing with me. But the static warped the sound, twisting it until it was almost human, but not quite. I reached for the button to transfer the call to my supervisor. But before I could, the voice whispered again, "Don't." The line popped with sharp bursts of static, like the sound of bones breaking. Then, silence again. I sat there, headset still on, my hands clammy. The office around me was empty. Just me, the low hum of electronics, and the taste of old coffee turning sour in my mouth. I knew I should have reported it, logged it properly, but something about that voice stopped me. Like if I told anyone, it would get worse, so I didn't. I wish I had. The rest of the night dragged on like normal. A domestic disturbance, a hit and run. I answered them all, my voice steady, my training intact. But every time the line went quiet between calls, I heard it again. Not in my headset, inside the silence itself. That faint crackle waiting for me. When the shift finally ended, I drove home in the dark. My headlights caught empty streets, quiet houses, a city asleep. I should have felt relief. Instead, I couldn't stop hearing it in my head. The way it said my name. I didn't sleep that morning. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, headset still in my bag like it carried the infection with it. Every sound in the apartment felt louder than it should. The fridge buzzing, the pipes creaking. Like static, just out of reach. I told myself I was tired. That was all. But deep down, I knew better. Because that voice hadn't just known my name. It had sounded like it was smiling when it said it. And the worst part? I think I smiled back. I went back to work the next night telling myself I was fine, that the call had been nothing more than interference. A crossed wire, maybe. A technical glitch. But the moment I sat down at my console, I knew I'd been lying to myself. The headset felt heavier than usual when I put it on. My hands were sweating before the first call even came through. I kept staring at the phone, waiting for it to light up with that same number. I tried to calm down, tried to focus on the routine. The shift started out normal enough. A burglary in progress, a minor car accident. Standard things. My voice stayed steady, but inside I was unraveling. Because between each call, in those seconds of silence, I swore I could hear it again. Not loud, not clear. Just a faint crackle beneath everything, like a voice trying to slip between the walls of sound. It felt patient, like it was waiting for me. And then around 2:30 in the morning, the line lit up. Unknown number. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to answer. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to, but I had to. It was my job. When? What's your emergency? Static. At first, just the same hiss and crackle as before. But then it shifted, like the sound of sand moving against glass. And inside it, words. Clearer than last time, not my name, someone else's. Melissa. I froze. The voice dragged the name out, stretching it thin, letting it bleed into the static. It wasn't just a word. It was almost like the sound was feeding on it. I knew that name. A few weeks ago, I'd taken a call from a young woman. She'd been trapped in her car after a wreck on the highway. She'd sounded terrified, but I'd stayed calm. Help had arrived too late. By the time they got her out, she was gone. Melissa. I whispered into the mic, my throat dry. Who is this? The static pulsed, like it was breathing. Then another name slid through. Carl. This time I felt my chest tighten. Carl had been one of ours, a fellow dispatcher. He died last year, sudden heart attack. His desk was still 3 rows behind me, empty and untouched. The line hissed louder, sharp and broken. Then another name, and another, and another, all of them familiar. Every name belonged to someone I had spoken to on the line. People whose voices I had been the last to hear. People who had died while I tried to keep them calm. I pressed the headset tighter against my ears, like I was trying to force the words out of existence. But the names just kept coming. Amber, David, John. Each one carved into me like a blade. I couldn't breathe. I ripped the headset off and slammed it on the desk. My supervisor, 2 rows away, glanced at me. I pretended I was fine. Pretended nothing had happened. But my hands were shaking so hard, I had to hold them under the desk to hide it. I stared at the phone, half expecting it to light up again. It didn't. The names had stopped, but I could still hear them in my head, echoing like they'd been burned into my memory. I tried to focus on the next call, a man reporting a fire. My voice was steady. I gave instructions, dispatched help, logged it cleanly, but the entire time I was waiting for the static to return, and it did. Not on the next call, not even the one after. But eventually it came back. That same number, that same hiss. This time I hesitated before answering. I hovered over the button, my hand trembling. Every instinct in me told me to ignore it, to let it ring, but I didn't. I answered. The hiss filled my ears instantly, louder than before. Like it had been waiting for me to come back, and then names again, faster this time. Melissa, Carl, Amber, David, John. Over and over, cycling through them like a chant. Each one spat out and pulled back into the static like the sound itself was chewing on them. Then it added one more. Daniel. My blood turned cold. I ripped the headset off again, slamming it down on the desk. My supervisor looked up, annoyed, but didn't say anything. I think she thought I was just tired, but I knew what I'd heard. My name added to the list. I couldn't focus for the rest of the shift. Every call blurred together. I kept checking the phone, waiting for it to light up again. It didn't, but the silence was worse. When I finally left that morning, the world outside felt different. The air heavier. The sky darker, even though the sun was coming up. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I couldn't stop thinking about those names. How it had known them. And then I remembered something I wish I hadn't. When I first started this job, an older dispatcher told me something. A half joke, half warning. He said the headset remembers. He said every call leaves something behind, a trace. That if you listen close enough, you can hear the voices of the ones who didn't make it. I laughed it off back then. Thought it was just gallows humor, but now I wasn't so sure. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of my apartment, headset still in my bag, feeling like it was radiating something. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. Because deep down, I was terrified that if I did, I'd hear the static anyway. And the worst part? I started to wonder if the voice was right. If the names weren't just memories, maybe they were waiting. Maybe they were calling me to join them, and I couldn't shake the thought that the static wasn't just noise, it was a list, and my name was already on it, I told myself I wouldn't answer if it called again. That was the promise I made to myself on the drive back to work. 2 nights had passed since I first heard my name in the static, and every hour in between had felt like borrowed time. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the voices repeating, cycling through those names, whispering mine like it had already claimed me. But I still showed up. Still sat down at my console, headset in hand, pretending I was in control, pretending I could handle it. The shift started as usual. A robbery, a drunk fight outside a bar, a house alarm tripped by mistake. My voice was steady, calm, professional. No one could hear the storm building under my skin, but I knew it was only a matter of time. At 3:11 a.m., the line lit up. Unknown number. I froze. My chest tightened, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I stared at the screen, willing it to go dark again. It didn't, I answered. Wevan, what's your emergency? The static burst in immediately, louder than ever, filling my ears with a roar like 100 voices tangled together. And then, through it, one voice cut through. Not distorted this time, clear. Cold. Daniel. I felt my stomach twist. What do you want from me? The voice didn't laugh. It didn't taunt. It just spoke, flat and certain, like it wasn't talking to me but telling me something it already knew. You'll be driving home. The light at 7th Street will turn red. You won't stop. I gripped the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. What are you talking about? The static hissed, long and sharp like a sigh. Then it continued. You'll hear me in the radio. You'll swerve. The truck won't have time to stop. My throat went dry. I wanted to rip the headset off, to throw it across the room, but I couldn't move. The voice was calm. Too calm. They'll say you fell asleep, that you were too tired, that you made a mistake, I whispered into the mic, my voice barely holding together. Why are you doing this? Silence. Just for a moment. Then, because you answered. I felt my whole body shake. Sweat dripped down my back. The room around me was empty. Rows of consoles glowing in the dark, the faint hum of electronics filling the air. It felt like the world had narrowed to just me and that voice. It spoke again, softer now, almost intimate. You listen to them all, don't you? Their last words, their fear. You think it doesn't follow you, but it does. It waits in the silence. And you... The static cracked violently, cutting the words in half. Then it steadied, and the voice returned, closer than before. You're one of us now. I shook my head, whispering like a prayer. No, I'm not. The line hissed again, louder, sharp enough to sting my ears. Then I heard them, the names, not whispered this time, shouted. Melissa, Carl, Amber, David, John, over and over, a chorus of the dead. My headset vibrated with the force of it, the sound drilling into me until I couldn't tell where their voices ended and mine began, and then cutting through them all, clear and calm. Daniel. I ripped the headset off and threw it to the floor. My chest heaved, my pulse racing like it would tear out of me, but even without the headset, I could still hear it. Faint. From the console itself, from the wires, from the air. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my chair. My supervisor called my name from across the room, asking if I was okay. I lied, said it was just feedback, a technical glitch. I don't know if she believed me, but she didn't press it. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I handled the calls, logged the details, kept my voice calm. But every time I paused, every time the line went quiet, I braced myself for the static, and I knew what was waiting at the end of it. When the shift finally ended, I sat in my car outside the building, staring at the empty street. I couldn't turn the key. My hands wouldn't move. Because I kept hearing those words again. You'll be driving home. The light at 7th Street will turn red. You won't stop. I wanted to take another route. I wanted to drive anywhere but there. But the voice had already spoken, and part of me believed it didn't matter what I did. Eventually, I started the car. My body moved on autopilot, the road stretching out in front of me. Every red light made my heart stop. Every sound in the radio felt like static waiting to crawl through. When I reached 7th Street, the light turned yellow. I slowed down, gripping the wheel until my hands ached. The light turned red, and I stopped. I sat there, holding my breath, staring at the intersection. Nothing happened. No truck, no accident. The light turned green, and I drove on, shaking with relief. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd beaten it, that the voice had been wrong. But as I pulled into my apartment lot, the radio flickered, just once. A crackle of static, and through it, soft, certain, close enough to feel its breath. You won't escape. I sat there in the dark, hands frozen on the wheel, knowing the voice wasn't finished. It wasn't warning me anymore. It was waiting. And the worst part, I think it already knows how my story ends. I used to work as a 911 dispatcher. It wasn't a glamorous job. It wasn't exciting, not like the shows on TV make it out to be. Most of the time it was quiet. Drunk drivers, neighbors fighting, kids dialing by accident. Sometimes an old woman calling because she was lonely and wanted someone to talk to. But every once in a while, you'd get that call. The kind that sticks with you forever. The kind you wish you could erase from your head. But it burns itself in anyway. The night I got hers, I didn't know it yet, but it would be the last call I ever took. It was after midnight. The call queue was dead silent. I remember sipping cold coffee from a paper cup, scrolling half asleep through yesterday's reports. Then the line lit up. "Dial 1, what's your emergency?" I asked, my voice flat, tired. At first, nothing, just static. A faint hiss, like wind through a broken phone line. Then I heard it, her breathing, shaky, fast. And then a whisper, "Please don't hang up." Her voice was cracked, brittle, like it had been crying for hours. "I won't," I said, sitting up straighter. "Tell me what's going on." She drew in a wet breath. "He's following me." My first thought was the usual, a jealous ex, maybe a stranger, maybe someone drunk and aggressive. I started going through the checklist. "Where are you right now?" I don't know. I've been walking for so long I can't go home." "He's there too." "Okay, slow down," I said, writing fast on the call log. "You said he's following you. Do you know who it is?" She went silent. Then, almost too soft to hear, "You wouldn't believe me." I glanced at the clock. 12:42 a.m. My stomach tightened the way it does when something isn't right. "Ma'am," I said gently, "I need you to try. Any detail helps." Her voice cracked, turning sharp. "I told you you wouldn't believe me. He's not real." I frowned, half expecting a delusional caller, maybe someone high or in psychosis. I'd had those before. They usually rambled about voices in their walls, cameras in their lights. But there was something in her tone, something too clear, that kept me from brushing her off. "Not real how?" I asked. She whispered again. "You can't see him. No one can. But he's always there. He's right behind me." Her words sent a shiver through me. I tried to stay calm, keep her talking. "All right, let's back up. What's your name?" "Emily." "Okay, Emily. I'm right here with you. We'll figure this out together. Where exactly are you?" "Look around." I could hear her footsteps, quick and uneven, crunching on gravel. She gasped like she'd just glanced over her shoulder. "I'm on a road. It's dark. No streetlights. I can't see the signs." I wrote it down anyway. "That's okay. Keep walking if you feel safe, but tell me, do you see any houses, buildings, anything familiar?" "No, just trees." She let out a sharp sob. "He's closer now. I can feel him breathing on my neck." The hair on my arms rose. My own office was empty, quiet except for the buzz of fluorescent lights. I found myself glancing behind me, just once. "You said no one can see him," I said carefully. "How do you know he's real?" Her answer came quick, desperate. "Because he talks to me." That sentence hung in the air. My throat was dry. "What does he say?" Her voice dropped to a whisper so thin I had to strain to hear. "He tells me I don't deserve to live." I closed my eyes for a second. This wasn't just a stalker. This was either a psychotic break or something worse. "Emily, listen to me," I said firmly. "You do deserve to live. Whatever this thing is telling you, it's lying. Just keep talking to me. Keep your eyes ahead." Her footsteps quickened. I could hear the ragged panic in her breath. "He's right beside me now. I can't run. If I run, he'll..." Her voice cracked into a scream, but it cut off so suddenly it made my stomach turn. "Emily!" I shouted into the line. Silence. Then a low, warbling sound came through the receiver. Not static, not wind, something else, like someone humming a lullaby deep underwater. And then, her voice again, only different, flat, empty. "He says he knows you too." My hand froze on the notepad. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. "Emily," I whispered, What do you mean? She laughed. A hollow, broken sound. He's been standing behind you this whole time. The phone went dead. I remember sitting there for what felt like hours, staring at the lifeless receiver. My ears rang in the silence. I kept glancing over my shoulder, heart pounding, every instinct telling me not to. But the room was empty. Just buzzing lights, cold coffee, the faint hum of machines. Still, it didn't feel empty. I filed the report, of course. Tried to trace the call. The tech team said it was impossible. The number was blocked, untraceable, like it had never existed. I told myself it was a prank, a cruel, sick prank. But the words she said wouldn't leave me. He's been standing behind you this whole time. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing her voice in the quiet. I kept thinking I saw something move in the corner of my room when I closed my eyes. And once, just once, I swore I felt a breath brush against the back of my neck. I didn't go back to work the next day, or the day after, and deep down, I knew I never would. I thought I'd be able to forget that night. I thought I could file the report, bury it under all the other calls, and move on. But I couldn't. Her voice wouldn't leave me. The way she whispered, the way she swore he was there, right behind her, right behind me, it kept replaying in my head like a song stuck on repeat. 3 days later, I broke. I went back to the station even though my hands shook the whole drive there. I told myself I'd listen to the call again, get closure. Maybe if I heard it one more time, I'd catch some detail I missed. Some clue that would prove it was just a prank. The supervisor didn't like it. She told me to leave it alone. But I begged. Finally, she gave me a tired look and said, "Fine. You want to torture yourself? Go ahead." I sat down at the terminal, pulled up the audio log, and pressed play. Her breathing filled my headphones instantly. Sharp, wet, desperate. Then the words burned into me already. "Please don't hang up." I flinched, even though I knew it was coming. I listened again. And again, every pause. Every footstep crunching on gravel. Every sob. Until something struck me, something I hadn't noticed before. It was the echo. At first, I thought it was nothing. But the more I replayed it, the clearer it became. Every step she took, I heard it bounce back, like she was walking down a canyon or through an empty city street. But she'd said she was on a road, surrounded by trees. I froze, staring at the screen. My gut twisted. If the call was real, if she was really out there, then the sound didn't match her story. I flagged the tech team, asked them to run a trace again, even though the number came up dead before. This time, they went deeper. Hours later, one of them, an older guy named Harris, pulled me aside. He looked pale, like he didn't want to tell me. But he did anyway. "We tracked it," he said. For a second. Just a blip. Then it was gone. "But we got coordinates." He slid a slip of paper toward me. An address on the edge of town. A place I hadn't been in years. I stared at it until the numbers blurred, because I knew that street, and it was empty. I grew up near there. Those blocks had been abandoned for years. Stores boarded up, houses collapsing in on themselves, windows shattered like dead eyes. Nobody lived there anymore. Nobody could. But that's where she was. That night, I couldn't resist. I told myself I was just going to drive past just to see, just to prove to myself there was nothing there. But when I pulled up, the street looked the way I remembered. Dead, hollow, rows of buildings with no lights, no signs of life. I parked, shut off the engine, and listened. Nothing. Not even crickets. I stepped out, gravel crunching under my boots. My breath fogged in the cool air. The wind didn't blow. The world felt... paused, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. They were faint, uneven, like someone was walking barefoot across broken glass. They came from farther down the street, echoing between the dead buildings. I froze, my skin prickling. My mind leapt back to her voice on the call, the way she said, "I can't run. If I run, he'll..." Before the scream cut off, I swallowed hard and called out, "Hello!" The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It pressed on me, heavy and unnatural, like the whole street was holding its breath. Then, softly, slowly, the footsteps started again. This time, closer, I turned in a circle trying to pinpoint them. But they bounced, echoed, slipped through the dark until I couldn't tell if they were ahead of me, behind me, or right beside me. I whispered to myself, "It's just an echo, just an echo." But it didn't sound like an echo. It sounded like someone following. I forced myself back into the car, slammed the door, and locked it. My chest heaved as I gripped the wheel. The footsteps stopped again. I waited. 1 minute, 2. Then, in the quiet, something hit me. The echo I'd heard in the recording. It sounded exactly like this street. The hollow bounce, the emptiness, the silence swallowing it whole. This was where she had been. I drove home shaking, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror the entire way. The next day at work, I asked Harris to pull the audio again. I wanted to check the timestamps, maybe compare them to the street's traffic cams. He hesitated, but finally he agreed. We pulled up the time of the call, 12:42 a.m. But when we cross-checked with the cameras, my stomach turned cold. The cameras showed nothing. No woman, no cars, no movement at all, just an empty street. For the entire duration of her call, the footage was frozen on that silence. The timestamp ticked forward, but nothing moved. Not even a stray cat. And yet on the audio, I could hear her footsteps. Her gasps. Her voice. It didn't make sense. Harris leaned back, rubbing his face. "Forget this one," he muttered. "It's not for us to figure out." But I couldn't. That night, when I went home, I heard it again. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed it. A faint rhythm under the hum of the bathroom fan. Step, step, step. At first, I thought it was the neighbor upstairs. But when I shut the fan off, the sound stayed. Step, step, step. I held my breath, straining my ears. It was coming from the hall outside my door. My apartment was empty. I knew it was. But the sound kept going, soft, dragging like bare feet on linoleum. I stood frozen, toothbrush in hand, foam dripping down my chin. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then it stopped. I waited. 1 second, 2, and then faintly, like a whisper carried on the air. "Please don't hang up." I dropped the toothbrush. My hands shook as I turned off the light and crawled into bed like a terrified child. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it wasn't real, that I was overtired, imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, that somehow her footsteps had followed me home, and worse, whatever had been chasing her, had come with her. I thought I could keep it contained, that if I ignored it long enough, if I convinced myself it was only stress, it would fade. That's what my therapist used to say about nightmares. Don't give them power, don't feed them with attention. But this wasn't a nightmare. This followed me when I was awake. It started small, a creak in the walls when I walked past, the faint sound of breathing behind the pipes. Sometimes I'd hear it late at night, 3 soft knocks coming from inside the plaster. Always in threes, always when I was alone. At first, I told myself it was just the building. Old apartments shift, settle, pipes groan. You hear things when you're tired. But after the second week, I couldn't deny it anymore, because the noises started answering me. One night, I'd just gotten into bed when I heard it. Knock, 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 I whispered without thinking. "Hello?" And the wall whispered back. Not words, not at first. Just a sigh, dragged out, low and broken, like someone pressing their lips against the plaster. Then, laughter. The same hollow laugh I'd heard on the call. I froze. The sheets clutched to my chest. My skin burned cold. It wasn't the building. It wasn't pipes. It was him. The thing she said followed her. The thing she said I wouldn't believe. It was here, inside my walls. I tried recording it. I set my phone down on the nightstand, hit record, and waited. Sure enough, the knocks came. 3, slow and deliberate. I didn't answer this time. I just lay there, stiff, praying it would stop. But when I played it back the next morning, the knocks weren't there. The recording was silent. That was almost worse. It meant it wasn't just sound. It was for me. And then the messages began. The first one was on the bathroom mirror. I'd taken a hot shower, steam fogging the glass. I wiped it clear with my hand, and there it was. "I see you." The words were written in the condensation, not with a finger. At least not like a human would. The letters were long, jagged, stretching from corner to corner like something had dragged claws through the mist. I stumbled back so hard I slipped on the wet tile. My towel fell away, but I didn't care. I just sat there, shivering, staring at the words until they faded back into fog. After that, they started appearing everywhere, sometimes in dust on the windowsill. Sometimes scrawled faintly on the wallpaper, only visible in the right light. Once, I woke up and found them etched into the condensation on the inside of a glass of water I'd left by the bed. Always the same. I see you, I know you, behind you. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept the lights on at all hours, but it didn't matter. The messages never stopped. And then one night, it changed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall, when I heard it. Not knocks, not breathing, scratching, the sound of fingernails or claws dragging slow across the inside of the drywall. It circled me, moving from one wall to the next, scratching as it went. Like it was tracing the room, enclosing me inside. I held my breath, heart hammering, waiting for it to stop. Then I looked down at the table. The wood was smooth, unmarked. But as I stared, letters began appearing on the surface, slow, carved deep, one after another, as if an invisible hand was pressing into the wood right in front of me. "I see you!" I screamed. I pushed the chair back so hard it toppled, and I ran, out of the kitchen, out of the apartment. I didn't even take shoes. I just ran down the stairs and into the street like a lunatic. People stared as I stood barefoot on the sidewalk, gasping, shaking. But I didn't care. I couldn't go back. Not that night. For days, I stayed at a cheap motel. I told myself I'd never go back to that apartment. But eventually I did. Not because I wanted to. Because I had nowhere else. My savings were running out, and I couldn't explain to anyone why I was avoiding home without sounding insane. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell, stale sour. Like something rotten had seeped into the walls. The second thing was the silence. No knocks. No scratching. No messages. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt normal. I almost let myself believe it was over. That maybe whatever it was, it had left. Maybe leaving for a few days broke its hold. That night, I even turned the lights off. And that was the biggest mistake I ever made. I woke to the sound of whispering. It wasn't outside the window. It wasn't in the hall, it was in my bedroom. Dozens of voices, layered and low, weaving in and out of each other. Men, women, children, all whispering at once, but not in words I could understand. Just sounds, sibilant and crawling, like snakes speaking through the dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, in the midst of them, one voice rose clear. Her voice! Emily! Please don't hang up! My blood ran cold. I sat up, fumbling for the lamp, but before I could turn it on, the whispers stopped. Silence. But the air felt wrong. Heavy, charged, like the seconds before lightning strikes. I turned on the light with shaking hands, and I saw it. On the wall above my bed, in huge black letters that hadn't been there before, "He is inside." The paint, or whatever it was, still dripped, running down the plaster in long, dark trails. I backed against the headboard, shaking so hard my teeth clattered, and from somewhere deep inside the wall, I heard it. The sound of breathing. Slow. Heavy. Right beside my ear. I pressed both hands against the plaster, desperate, like I could push it away. But the wall throbbed under my palms, warm, like skin. That's when I knew. It wasn't in the building. It wasn't in the walls. The walls were it. The whole place had become its body. Every floorboard, every pipe, every beam of wood was alive with it. I'd been living inside it the whole time, and it was done hiding. I left that night. I didn't even pack. I just ran into the street again, barefoot, half-dressed, shaking. People probably thought I was on drugs, but I didn't care. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes, though, when I close my eyes, I still hear it. The scratching, the whispers. And when I wake up, no matter where I am, motel, friend's couch, even my car, I always find the same thing waiting for me. Words on glass. On paper, on skin, written just for me. I see you. People think the scariest part of my story is the call itself. That night when she begged me not to hang up, when her scream cut off, when her voice changed, when she told me he was standing behind me. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part is that the call never really ended. The line may have gone dead. The phone may have gone silent, but she never stopped speaking to me. Not once. It's been months since then, and I still hear her voice. Sometimes it's faint, like a whisper under my thoughts, threading between the sound of traffic, the hum of lights, the static on the TV. Other times, it's clear, too clear. Like she's standing right beside me, breathing into my ear, and every time the words are the same. Please don't hang up. I tried to fight it. I tried to pretend it wasn't happening. I smashed my phone, got a new number, disconnected my landline. But it didn't matter. Because it wasn't coming through the phone anymore. It was coming through me. The first time I realized that, I was in the grocery store. The place was nearly empty, just the sound of carts rolling and the buzz of fluorescent lights. I was reaching for a box of cereal when I froze, because I heard it. Her voice. Not in my ears, but inside my chest, vibrating up through my ribs, spilling out into my head like it belonged to me. Please don't hang up. I dropped the box. It hit the floor with a dull thud, scattering flakes across the tile. People turned to stare. I just stood there, shaking, my mouth dry, because I knew then she wasn't gone. She had never left. After that, the calls came everywhere, not on devices, not through speakers, but through walls, through wires, through silence itself. I'd be driving with the radio off, and suddenly her voice would crackle through the dashboard. I'd shut it off, kill the engine, sit in silence. But the silence would speak back. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and the dark would breathe with her words. Please don't hang up. I'd be brushing my teeth, water running, and I'd hear her between the splashes, whispering, "He's still here." Sometimes I'd wake up with the phone pressed against my ear, even though I hadn't touched it. The screen blank, the line dead, but her voice pouring out of me anyway, and every time, it was like she was still trapped in that call, still, walking that empty road, still chased by the thing no one could see, still begging me not to. Leave her alone, but I couldn't help her, and that's what broke me. I started recording myself. I thought maybe if I captured it, if I played it back, someone else would finally hear it too. But every recording came back blank. Nothing but dead air. Once, though, I caught something. It wasn't her. Not exactly. It was a hum, low and wet, like something breathing through water. That same sound I'd heard when the line first went dead. When I listened closely, I could almost make out words inside it. Not English, not anything human, but words all the same. And I knew it was him. The one she was running from. The one she said no one could see. The one she swore was standing behind. Me. He was still here too. I stopped leaving my apartment. I stopped working. Food piled up on the counter untouched. My phone stayed dead, the cord ripped out of the wall, the battery left to rot. But the calls never stopped. They came in dreams now. Long, winding conversations where I was back at the dispatch desk. Headset on, voice steady, trying to keep her calm. But no matter what I said, no matter how long I stayed, the dream always ended the same way. With her screaming. With her voice twisting into his. With the words, "He is inside." And I would wake up shaking, my pillow wet with sweat, my hands gripping the sheets so tight my nails tore through the fabric. Every morning, my throat was raw like I'd been speaking all night. Sometimes, when I looked at the clock, the red numbers blinked 12:42 a.m., the exact time the call came in. It didn't matter if it was morning or afternoon or the middle of the night. The clock always found a way to go back to the beginning, back to when it all started. The last time it happened. It didn't feel like a dream. I was at my desk again, headset snug against my ear, the glow of monitors in front of me. The call light blinked red and I answered. 9-1, what's your emergency? And there she was, Emily, her voice cracked, desperate, the same as the first night. Please don't hang up. I tried to tell her I wouldn't, that I was here, that she wasn't alone. But when I looked down at my hands, there was no notepad, no pen, only skin. And carved into it, across my palms, were the words, "I see you." Her footsteps echoed loud in my headset, crunching gravel, uneven, dragging. But this time, I realized something. They weren't her footsteps. They were mine. I was the one walking the empty street. I was the one being followed. And when I turned my head, when I felt the breath hot against my neck, I knew I had been on the line with myself all along. The call was never hers. It was mine. Now, I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I'm still sitting in that chair at the dispatch center, headset pressed to my ear, waiting for a call that never ends, or if I left long ago, and everything since has just been his way of keeping me talking. Because that's the thing. I can't hang up, even now. Even as I tell you this, I can hear her voice weaving under mine, begging, crying, whispering the same words over and over until they no longer sound like English. Please don't hang up. Please don't hang up. Please don't hang up. And sometimes, when I pause long enough, when I let the silence stretch, I hear another voice slide in, deeper, hungrier, right behind me, saying the only thing he's ever said. He is inside. And I know what he means now. He's not in the walls anymore. He's not on the line. He's not chasing her. He's in me. And there's no way out. Because the call never ends. I used to work the night shift at a small emergency call center. It wasn't anything glamorous. Just rows of desks, the hum of old computers, and the weight of silence broken only when the phones rang. Most of the time, the calls were routine. Wrong numbers, noise complaints, people testing the line. But every once in a while, something slipped through that stuck with you. Something that gnawed at the back of your mind long after your shift ended. The night it happened, I remember how tired I was. The room smelled like burnt coffee and stale carpet. The clock on the wall ticked so loudly it almost felt deliberate, like it wanted to remind us how slow time moved at night. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes, when the phone lit up. I answered in my usual voice, calm, professional. "Emergency line. What's your situation?" At first I didn't hear anything, just static, faint like someone breathing into the receiver. I was about to repeat myself when I heard it. A sound so soft I almost thought I imagined it. A child crying. It wasn't loud, not the sharp wails you expect from a baby. It was broken, muffled, like the kind of crying you do when you're trying not to be heard. The kind that comes from your chest, heavy and tired. "Hello?" I asked, sitting forward in my chair. "Can you hear me? Are you safe?" The crying continued. A small voice, maybe 4 or 5 years old, whimpering through the static. My skin prickled. Children called sometimes, lost, scared, but usually you could hear background noise, a TV, traffic, a parent's voice in the distance. This was different. It sounded isolated. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" I kept my voice soft, careful. The sobs quieted for a second. Then, in the faintest whisper, a single word. Cold. That was it. Just that. And then the crying started again, deeper this time. My throat went dry. I motioned to the supervisor on duty, but he just shrugged, like it was another prank. Calls like that happen more often than you'd think. But this didn't feel like a prank. The sound was too raw, too real. "Where are you? Can you tell me where you are?" I pressed. Nothing. Just the sobbing, echoing against something hollow. It almost sounded like it was coming from a basement or an empty room. No street names, no identifying sounds, just that endless broken crying. I traced the call, but the system gave me nothing. No number, no location, just a blank screen, like the call didn't exist. I tried again, checking the logs, but it was as if the line had come out of nowhere. "Listen," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. "We can help you, okay? You just have to stay on the line." But the sobbing grew quieter, drifting further away. I pressed the headset to my ear, straining. My supervisor shook his head and turned back to his paperwork, but I couldn't let it go. Something about it felt wrong. "Can you tell me who's with you?" I asked. The crying stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the sobs had been. Then, in that same whisper, I heard, "They forgot me." My stomach dropped. I asked again, "Who forgot you? Where are you?" But the line went dead. Just nothing. I sat there staring at the phone, my heart racing. I logged the call, wrote down every detail I could remember, but the system wouldn't let me save it. The file kept glitching out, the text turning into strings of nonsense symbols before disappearing. My supervisor rolled his eyes, muttering about faulty equipment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had slipped through the cracks. For the rest of the night, I kept expecting the phone to ring again. I couldn't focus on anything else. Even when other calls came in, I found myself half listening, waiting for that soft, broken voice to return. And then, about an hour before my shift ended, it did. The line lit up again. Same blank screen, same static, and beneath it, the sobbing. This time it was louder, more desperate, like the child was closer to the receiver. "Hello? It's me again," I said quickly. "I'm here. I didn't forget you. Can you tell me where you are?" The crying hitched like the child was trying to speak through the tears. I heard scraping sounds like something heavy being dragged across a floor. "Dark," the voice whispered. "Okay," I said, gripping the desk. "It's dark. Are you alone?" A pause. Then the faint sound of a lullaby hummed in the background. Not a recording, not a toy. It sounded human. Off-key, slow, like someone singing just out of breath. "Who's singing?" I whispered. No answer. Just the lullaby growing fainter. I felt cold all over. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones, no matter how much you try to shake it off. My supervisor walked past, saw the look on my face and mouthed, "Another prank?" I shook my head, but he was already gone. The child spoke again, almost too soft to hear. "They don't see me." My hands trembled. "Who doesn't see you?" But before I could get an answer, the line cut out. I didn't sleep when I got home that morning. I just sat in my apartment, lights on, replaying the voice in my head, that tiny whisper, those words, cold, dark, forgotten. The next night I went in early, determined to figure out what was happening. I checked the call logs, the recordings, everything, but the calls weren't there, not even as deleted files. It was as if they'd never happened. Still, I couldn't let it go. Every time the phone rang, my chest tightened, waiting for that fragile voice. Hours passed. Then, just as the building settled into its familiar quiet, the line lit up again. Static, breathing, the sound of a child crying. I whispered into the receiver, barely able to breathe. "I hear you. I'm here." This time the voice was closer, clearer, and when it spoke, I felt something in me fracture. "You forgot me too." I froze, mouth dry, unable to respond. The line hummed with low static, like the sound of air moving through an empty house. I whispered back, desperate, but the child only kept repeating it, over and over. "You forgot me too. You forgot me too. You forgot me too." And then the sobbing cut off, abruptly, like a switch had been flipped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, watching, waiting. I sat there long after the line went dead, my hand still pressed to the receiver. I told myself it was just a glitch, some sick prank, maybe even a recording. But deep down, I knew better. That voice didn't sound like something alive. It sounded like something left behind. And the worst part wasn't the crying. It was the way it knew my name when I hadn't given it. I told myself I wouldn't mention the calls to anyone else. Not my supervisor, not my co-workers, not even the officers we sometimes dispatched. It wasn't because I thought they'd laugh, though they would have. It was because some part of me believed that if I said it out loud, if I made it real, then I'd never be able to forget the sound of that voice. but the truth has a way of pushing itself into the open. The next shift, the call came again. Same blank screen, same sobbing. Only this time, before the line cut, I heard a knock. 3 sharp raps, like knuckles against wood, and then silence. That was when I filed the report. I didn't tell them what I really thought. I wrote it the way you'd expect. Possible child in distress, unclear location, suspicious call. I left out the part about the lullaby. I left out the whisper that knew my name. Still, it was enough for the dispatcher to send a pair of officers to check. They started with the obvious. The empty lots near the industrial park. The alleys behind the row of shops where the homeless sometimes stayed. Every time I heard their radios crackle, I felt my chest tighten. I wanted them to find something, anything, proof that I wasn't imagining it. But the reports came back the same over and over. Negative, nothing found, until one of them said something strange. Dispatch, we've got signs of habitation here. Broken toys, blankets. Looks like someone's been staying in this unit. I leaned forward. My headset dug into my ears. Any children? A pause. Just static and the shuffle of boots against concrete. Then, no one here. The line went quiet again. They moved from one place to the next. Abandoned apartments with curtains drawn tight. Basements that smelled of damp wood and mildew. Every time it was the same. Signs that someone had lived there recently. Food wrappers. Crayons scattered across the floor. A mattress pulled into the corner, but no child, no people at all. It was like chasing shadows. The officers' voices grew more clipped as the night went on. They stopped saying much, just negative or empty, but I could hear something under their words, a kind of unease. They didn't like what they were finding, and neither did I because none of it made sense. You can't just vanish. Not like that. Not without someone noticing. I thought about the voice on the phone. That soft crying. The whispers about being forgotten. And I wondered if maybe the officers weren't finding the child because they were looking for something alive. At one point, one of the officers forgot to release his radio, and I caught the sound of him muttering to his partner. His words were faint, but I'll never forget them. Feels like we're just walking through their memories. Their memories, not ours, not theirs, theirs. When I asked him to repeat, he clicked off the line without a word. The search continued for hours. They checked every alley, every stairwell, every locked room they could get into. And in every place it was the same story. Someone had been there, recently, but they were gone now. I started to picture it in my head. The blanket crumpled in the corner. The crayon drawings scratched onto walls, half faded. A chair turned toward a window as if someone had been waiting, but no one there to claim any of it. When my shift finally ended, I didn't go home right away. I sat in the break room staring at my hands. The officers had done their job. They'd searched, they'd reported, and they'd come up empty. That should have been the end. But it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't yet understand. I told myself not to think about it. I told myself to just leave it at work. But later that night, lying in my bed, I couldn't stop imagining those empty rooms. I kept hearing the officers' voices, flat and careful, as they described what they saw. Toys scattered, drawings on the walls, signs of habitation. But no children. And then, just as I was starting to drift, I heard it. Not through the phone this time. Not through a radio, through the walls of my own apartment. A faint, muffled sobbing. I sat up, my chest tight. I told myself it was a neighbor. Thin walls, late at night, someone's kid having a bad dream. That was all. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized it wasn't coming from the walls at all. It was coming from the empty room at the end of my hallway, the room I never used. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat in the dark, staring at the doorway, waiting for the sound to stop. but it didn't. It went on, soft and broken, the same way it had sounded through the headset. I never opened that door. I couldn't. Not that night. In the morning, I told myself it had been a dream. Just exhaustion. Just my mind replaying the calls over and over until I believed they were real. But the thing is, the crying stopped the second I whispered into the dark. "I hear you." And I swear I heard a small voice answer. "You can't find me." I didn't sleep again after that. The officers kept searching for the next few nights. They filed their reports, each one the same. Empty rooms, empty beds, empty streets, but always those same traces of life left behind, as if someone had been there only moments before. And always the absence. The absence that felt heavier than presence ever could. I wanted to believe it was all coincidence. That maybe we were just chasing squatters, kids hiding from parents, someone moving place to place in the shadows. But the voice on the phone wouldn't let me believe that. Because every night, without fail, it came back. And every night, it sounded closer. By the third night, the officers didn't want to keep looking. I could hear it in their voices even if they didn't say it outright. Their reports grew shorter. Their pauses grew longer. And when they signed off, it sounded like relief. But the search didn't stop. Not really, because new calls kept coming in. The same blank screens, the same static, the same muffled crying. Always at night, always when the building felt the most hollow. And the moment those calls were logged, the officers had no choice but to follow. That's when the toys started showing up. The first one was a small stuffed bear. One of the officers radioed in, his voice clipped, trying to sound normal. He said they'd found it in an alley, right where the crying seemed to echo the loudest. The bear was damp, its fur matted with dirt, one eye missing. He bagged it, tagged it, and moved on. But a few hours later, another officer swore the same bear was waiting for them at a different site. Same missing eye, same dirt-stained fur. At first, they thought it was a mistake. Maybe two different toys. Maybe they looked similar. But when they compared, the tags matched. It was the same bear. They locked it in evidence after that. But it didn't matter. Because the toys kept appearing, a red ball in the middle of a basement floor, a set of plastic blocks stacked neatly on a staircase, a doll lying, face down in the corner of an abandoned bedroom. Everywhere they searched, a toy was there. Sometimes small, sometimes broken. Always out of place, always waiting, and each time the crying followed. It didn't matter where they went. The sound of a child's sobs echoed through the walls, the alleys, the stairwells, always just out of reach, always pulling them deeper. I listened over the radio as they described it. Their voices grew tight, their words clipped. One officer admitted that the crying didn't sound like it was coming from a single direction. He said it was everywhere, behind them, above them, under their feet, like the walls themselves were carrying it. Another officer swore he heard the child right next to him, whispering through the static of his own radio. But when he called back, his partner hadn't heard a thing. I sat in the call center, headset pressed tight against my ear, trying not to breathe too loud. The room around me felt smaller each night, like the shadows were pressing closer, and still, the toys kept moving. The bear that had been locked in evidence, the next morning it was gone. The cabinet was still locked, but the shelf was empty. A few hours later, it was found again, this time sitting in the back seat of one of the patrol cars. Nobody admitted to putting it there. Nobody even wanted to touch it. By now, the officers had stopped filing detailed reports. Their words turned vague. Possible signs of habitation. Child's belongings discovered. They didn't say what the belongings were anymore. I think they were afraid to, but I heard them over the radio when they forgot to mute. I heard their footsteps echo through empty rooms, followed by the scrape of something rolling across the floor. A ball, a toy car, a sound that didn't belong in those dark, abandoned spaces. One night, an officer cursed loudly over the channel, his voice shaking. He said the doll he'd seen in the corner earlier was now sitting upright, facing the doorway. He was alone in that building. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I sat there gripping the receiver, my palms sweating, listening as grown men trained to deal with danger, argued about whether to keep searching. And through all of it, I could hear the crying, Sometimes it was sharp, desperate. Sometimes it was soft, barely there, but it never stopped. It followed them through every building, every alley, every empty room. And I began to realize something. It wasn't leading them anywhere. It was keeping them lost, because no matter how many places they searched, no matter how many toys they found, the child was never there. Only the echoes, only the reminders. One officer asked me directly over the line if I thought it was possible the calls were recordings, that maybe someone was playing tricks, moving toys around to mess with them. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that, but when I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come, because deep down I knew the truth. No prank could make a child's cry sound like that, and no person could move faster than the officers themselves, leaving toys behind in places that had already been searched. It wasn't possible. It wasn't human. The worst night came at the end of the week. The radio crackled alive, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. An officer's voice came through, panicked, clipped. "Dispatch, we've got movement upstairs. Thought we saw something." I leaned forward, heart pounding. "Do you need backup?" A long pause. Then, in a low voice, "It's just toys," I frowned. "Clarify. What toys?" "All of them," he whispered. I didn't understand at first. But then I heard it in the background, the scrape of plastic against wood, the hollow thump of a ball bouncing down the stairs, the creak of something small dragging across the floor, dozens of toys, moving, shifting, closer. The officer's breathing quickened. His partner hissed something about getting out, about leaving, but neither of them moved. They just stood there, frozen, while the toys crept toward them in the dark. And then, layered beneath it all, came the crying. Not faint this time. Not distant. Right there in the room with them, so close it made the speakers crackle. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. My supervisor finally glanced up, eyebrows raised, but he didn't say a word. Maybe he heard it too. Maybe he didn't want to admit it. The officers pulled back after that. They left the building, their voices low and shaking, refusing to describe what they'd seen. They didn't log a report that night. They didn't log anything at all. And I can't blame them, because even through the static, even through the distance, I could hear the sound that followed them out. Not toys this time, not crying, laughter, a child's soft laugh, echoing long after the line went dead. And I realized something that made my skin crawl. Toys weren't waiting for us to find the child. They were reminders. Reminders. That the child had already found us. The city had plenty of abandoned places. Empty buildings, locked rooms, alleys that smelled of damp and rot. But the playground was different. It sat at the edge of an old housing block, fenced in by rusting iron, half swallowed by weeds. The swings hung limp, their chains groaning whenever the wind touched them. The slide was cracked and faded, the paint peeling away to reveal bare metal underneath. It was the kind of place people stopped noticing a long time ago, but the calls led us there. That night, just after 2 a.m, the crying returned. The voice was sharper, clearer, the sobs cutting through the static like glass. I logged it, my hand trembling, and the trace pointed toward that playground. I remember staring at the address on the screen, the way the numbers seemed to burn into me. Because I knew that place. I'd walked past it as a kid. I remembered how my mother would pull me closer, telling me not to go near. Even back then, it felt wrong. A place meant for children that no child dared to use. The officers weren't happy when I gave them the location. Their silence said everything. But they went anyway, because that's what they had to do. I listened as their boots crunched across the gravel path. Their voices were low, tense. One muttered that the swings were moving, but the wind was still. Another said he heard footsteps, light and quick, darting between the structures. And then came the laughter, soft at first. A giggle, but not from one place. It circled them. I pressed the headset tighter, my pulse thundering in my ears. "Do you have visual on the child?" I asked. My voice cracked. "No child," one officer whispered. "Just shadows." I wanted him to explain, but before I could ask, I heard it. The scrape of shoes against the slide. The hollow thump of someone dropping down onto the ground. The creak of chains as the swings shifted back and forth, but no one was there. The officers moved through the playground, their flashlights sweeping across empty space. Every time the beams passed, the sounds stopped. But the moment they turned away, the laughter returned. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't cruel. It was playful, like the child was still there. Still playing, even if no one could see them. I tried to stay professional, but my voice shook as I asked them to describe what they saw. One of them muttered something I'll never forget. "It feels like the shadows are heavier here." He didn't mean darker. He meant heavier, like the air itself was thick with something unseen. I closed my eyes and tried to picture it. The swings moving, the slide creaking, the laughter echoing, and all of it happening in a place that should have been silent. The officers didn't stay long. One of them swore he felt a hand brush against his own, small, cold. When he swung his light, nothing was there. That was enough. They backed out of the playground, their voices tight, their breaths ragged. But even as they left, the laughter followed. It trailed them out through the fence, across the cracked sidewalk, and into the night. And when the line finally went silent, I sat there staring at the empty phone screen, my own reflection staring back. Because I'd heard it too. Not through the radio, through the walls of the call center itself. That faint, playful giggle, as if the child had followed me too. I didn't tell anyone. Not my supervisor. Not the officers. No one. But the truth is, the playground never left me. I started dreaming about it. At first, it was just flashes. The rusted swings, the cracked slide, the peeling paint. Then it grew longer. Nights where I wandered through it alone, the laughter echoing around me, shadows darting just out of sight, and sometimes in those dreams, I could swear I saw something. A small figure standing at the edge of the sandbox. Not moving, not laughing, just watching. When I woke, I could still hear the creak of chains, still feel the weight of those heavy shadows pressing against my chest. I stopped sleeping after that, but the officers didn't stop searching. Every few nights, they were called back. And every time it was the same. Toys scattered across the gravel, swings that moved on their own, footsteps circling them in the dark. The child was never there, not in any way they could prove. But the laughter always was. One officer broke down after a call. He told me that while he was standing in the middle of the playground, he felt a tug at his jacket. When he turned, there was nothing. But when he looked down, he swore he saw small footprints in the dirt, fresh, right behind his own. Another officer refused to go back, said the sound of the laughter had gotten inside his head, said it followed him home. He'd be sitting in his living room and he'd hear it, quiet but close. And I knew exactly what he meant, because I heard it too. The playground wasn't just a place anymore. It was something else, something alive. It wasn't holding the child. It was the child, the slides, the swings, the shadows. All of it was just pieces of something larger. A memory made solid. A memory we kept walking into, over and over, without realizing it. And each time we entered, it grew stronger. That thought kept me awake more than anything else. Because if the playground was alive, if it was holding on to something forgotten, then maybe, piece by piece, it was learning how to follow us out. The laughter confirmed it. It didn't stay in the playground. It didn't stay in the radio. It slipped into the empty corners of the call center, into the silence of my apartment, into the places I thought were safe. And the worst part? It didn't sound like a stranger anymore. It sounded familiar, like a voice I should have known long ago. A voice I should have remembered, but couldn't. The call center used to feel safe. For all its faults, the flickering lights, the buzzing computers, the coffee that tasted like ash, it was still a place with walls, with people, with structure, a place where things made sense. But after the playground, it stopped feeling like that. The echoes came with me. It started small, a faint sound at the edge of hearing, like a breath slipping between wires. I told myself it was the equipment, the aging phone lines crackling with static. But the longer I sat there, the clearer it became. Crying. Not loud. Not even constant. Just there, behind the voices of callers. beneath the hum of machines, sometimes so faint I thought I imagined it, but always there, and it never stayed in one place. One night it was under the desk, a muffled whimper that made my legs go numb. Another, it came from the far end of the hall, the sound bouncing off the tiles until I couldn't tell how far away it was. And sometimes it was right beside me. I would sit with my headset on, listening to someone complain about a neighbor or a false alarm, and just under their words I'd hear it. A small sob, a tiny voice breaking apart. Cold, I would freeze, my hands stiff above the keyboard. The callers never reacted, never noticed. It was only me. That's when I realized the sound wasn't traveling through the lines anymore. It was in the building itself. The others didn't notice. They went about their shifts like nothing was wrong, but every so often I'd catch one of them pausing, frowning at the walls like they thought they'd heard something. Then they'd shake it off and keep talking, but I couldn't shake it, because it didn't stop when I left. In the parking lot, the cries followed, thin and stretched across the night air. In my apartment, they seeped through the vents, the floorboards, the empty rooms. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those toys. That broken bear, that doll sitting upright where it shouldn't be, the swings creaking in the dark, and always, always, the sound of the child, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, sometimes whispering. I kept telling myself I was losing my mind, that I was exhausted, overworked, cracking under the pressure of all the calls. But if it was just me, why did the officers refuse to go back? Why did they stop answering my dispatch requests altogether? The reports ended suddenly. No explanation. Just silence, and yet the echoes didn't stop. One night, near dawn, I was the only one left in the office. The others had gone home, leaving me to finish the reports. The air was heavy still. I remember leaning forward, staring at the glow of the monitor when I heard it again. Crying. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was behind me, slow, ragged. I turned, my chair creaking. The office was empty. Just rows of desks, silent screens, and shadows pressed into the corners. But the crying didn't stop. It grew louder, closer. I whispered. "I hear you." The sound hitched, just like it had on the phone. And then came the words, "You forgot me." I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood. My throat was dry, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't. I never... But the voice cut me off. You forgot me too. The air turned colder. My breath fogged in front of me. And in the reflection of the dark computer screen, I thought I saw movement. Small, pale, a figure standing just behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Only the sound remained. Sobbing, laughing, whispers bleeding into each other until I couldn't tell which was which. I stumbled into the break room. My chest tight, but the sound followed. I went into the hallway, but it echoed there too. Louder, sharper. There was nowhere to go, no door I could close, no switch I could flip. The child's voice filled every corner of that building, every crack in the walls, until it felt like the whole place was alive with it, and I realized the truth. It was never about the toys, or the rooms, or the playground. It was about the echo, the memory of something left behind, clinging to whatever space it could, and now it clung to me. I tried to leave that night. I grabbed my bag, my keys, but the moment I stepped outside, I froze, because the crying was there too. Not muffled by walls, not filtered through radios. It was in the open air, carried on the wind. Everywhere I turned, it followed, the sound of a child I could never see, a child I could never reach, and the words never changed. Cold, dark, forgotten. The more I heard them, the more I wondered if maybe that was the point. Maybe this wasn't a haunting at all. Maybe it was a reminder of someone left behind, someone we'd all chosen not to remember. The officers stopped taking my calls. My supervisor avoided me, his face pale, his words short. No one wanted to hear about the crying anymore. No one wanted to admit it existed, but I couldn't escape it. Even now, as I sit here, I hear it. Soft, broken, moving through the walls of my home, I don't think it will ever leave. Because the thing about echoes is, they don't just disappear. They linger, they stretch, and sometimes they grow louder than the original sound. I think that's what the child has become. Not a person, not a ghost, an echo that never ends, and now it's mine. Forever. I used to work as a 911 operator. Most of the calls I got were routine. Noise complaints, car accidents, domestic disputes that were already too far gone by the time the phone rang. You start to hear the same voices, the same cries, the same tired anger on repeat. After a while, you can tell what the call will be about in the first 10 seconds. But there was one man, one caller I'll never forget, and sometimes when the phones are quiet in my head, I can still hear his voice. It started on a Monday night. The shift was dragging, the way it always does after midnight. My headset pressed against my temple, the soft hum of the dispatch floor mixing with the clicking of keyboards. Then the line lit up. 911, what's your emergency? The man's voice was calm at first. There's a man outside my house, he said. He's just standing there. That wasn't unusual. We get dozens of calls like that. People drinking too much, someone wandering too close to the wrong yard. I asked the usual questions. Can you describe him? Is he armed? Has he tried to break in? No, he said. He hasn't moved. He's just watching me. I typed in the report. We'll send someone to check the area. Stay inside. Keep your doors locked. He thanked me, almost too politely. Then the line went dead. I thought that was the end of it. But less than an hour later, the same line blinked. I picked up again. 911. What's your emergency? It's me again. The same voice. He's still there. This time, his tone was sharper. His breathing heavier. I checked the report. A unit had already driven past his street. Nothing suspicious was found. I told him this, but he didn't sound convinced. You don't understand, he whispered. He's closer now. He was at the edge of the yard before. Now he's at the window. Something about the way he said it unsettled me. Most callers exaggerate, but this man didn't. His words were steady, deliberate. I told him to stay away from the window, to move to the back of the house. He said he already had. He said the blinds were shut, but he could still feel the man staring. I filed another note, sent another request. Again, the patrol car circled back. Nothing. When I tried to reassure him, he cut me off. I saw his face this time, he said. It looked like mine. The line clicked dead. For a while, I just sat there with my headset still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. I told myself he was drunk or sleep-deprived. People call us in that half-dream state all the time, swearing they see shadows that aren't there. Still, something about his voice lingered with me. The third call came just before dawn. His voice was shaking now, frantic but strangely restrained, like he was trying not to scream. He knocked this time, he said. I heard it. 3 knocks. But when I went to the door, there was no one there. Just me. Just my reflection in the glass. I felt my stomach drop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What do you mean, your reflection? I asked. I mean, he said. I looked out, and the man was gone. But I saw myself standing on the porch, smiling, waving at me. His breathing grew uneven. He muttered something I couldn't catch. I leaned in, straining to hear. He knows my name? The line cut again. This time I called him back. We're not supposed to. Not unless there's proof of danger. But I couldn't help it. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. But it wasn't him. It was me. Word for word. My own voice. Calm and rehearsed. 101, what's your emergency? I froze. I thought it was a glitch. Some cross-line interference. But no. My own recorded greeting wasn't supposed to play like that. The voice on the other end even had the same small pause I always left after emergency. Then I heard him, faint in the background. No, that's not me. That's not me. Don't listen to him. The call ended. I stared at my screen, at the number still blinking in red. My hands were shaking. I flagged the report, wrote everything down. But by the time the next shift came in, I couldn't explain it properly. It sounded insane. Still, the calls kept coming. Tuesday night. Same man, same house, same story. Each time he said the figure was closer. Each time patrol units reported nothing. They said the street was empty, quiet, no signs of forced entry. No footprints, nothing, but I believed him. I hated that I did, but something in me believed every word. By the fifth call, he was crying. "He's inside," he whispered. "I can hear him upstairs, walking around." He sounds like me. He laughs like me. I begged him to leave the house, to run, to get somewhere public. He wouldn't. He said if he left, the other version would follow. "He wants me to answer the door," he said. "He wants me to let him in." But I already did, didn't I? When I answered you, when I answered myself, the words hit me like a weight. I didn't even know what he meant, but they stuck. And then silence. No more calls. No one by that name in the system. No forwarding address. The number disconnected by the end of the week. I thought that was the end. But 2 months later, on another dead shift, my phone rang again. I picked up, instinctively repeating the same greeting, and the voice on the other end said, "I'm still here." The first time he called again, I almost didn't answer. His number had been dead for weeks. I'd checked it myself over and over, telling myself it was gone for good. But there it was, flashing red on my screen like it had never left. My hand shook as I pressed the receiver to my ear. "When? What's your emergency?" The silence on the other end was long, too long. Then came his voice, flat, weak, but still his. He moved the walls. At first, I thought I misheard. I asked him to repeat it. "The wall," he said again. "They're not where they should be." His breathing was heavy, uneven. He sounded exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He tried to explain, words tumbling out too fast. He said he walked from his kitchen to his hallway and ended up in his basement. He said he opened his front door and found himself in the bathroom. "He's changing it," he whispered. "He wants me to lose track. He wants me to forget what's real." I typed notes into the system, but none of it made sense. "How do you dispatch help for twisted architecture? What address do you even give?" I tried to calm him, told him it might be stress, exhaustion, maybe even gas fumes. I told him to get fresh air. But he laughed, short and broken. "There's no outside anymore. The line went dead. That should have been the end." But he called again less than 30 minutes later. This time his tone was frantic. "Listen to me," he snapped, before I could even greet him. "You have to understand. The clock on my wall is spinning backwards. It was 1:30, then it was midnight, then it was tomorrow. I don't know what day it is anymore. I don't know how long I've been here. I opened my mouth to ask something, anything, but he cut me off again. There are 2 windows in my bedroom now. There used to be one. I counted them. I touched them. But when I turn around, there's only one again. He's doing it to me. He's folding my house into something it's not supposed to be." I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to keep him grounded. "Where is he now?" I asked. The man's breathing stopped for a moment. Then in a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, "He's everywhere." I froze. "What do you mean everywhere?" "He's in the corners," he whispered. "In the folds of the rooms. When I blink, the walls stretch and he's there. When I look away, the doors multiply and he's standing in all of them at once. Sometimes he looks like me. Sometimes he looks like you." My stomach tightened. "Me?" I asked. He didn't answer. The line crackled, faint and distorted, like there was another voice pressing against his. For a moment, I swore I heard my own words repeating back to me half a second too late. Like the call itself had a shadow. Then he hung up again. That night, I couldn't shake it. I kept thinking about what he said. The folding house, the second window, the clocks running backward. I tried to tell myself it was psychosis, some untreated disorder unraveling in real time. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. Because part of me remembered something, a night years ago when I was a kid. I had woken up to use the bathroom, but when I opened my bedroom door, the hallway wasn't there. I walked through my closet instead, and it led straight into the kitchen. My mother told me I was dreaming, but I know what I saw. I know the way the floor shifted beneath my feet. So when the man called again the next night, I wasn't surprised. I answered faster than I should have. His voice was thin, breaking. There are stairs where the stairs shouldn't be. I opened the closet and there was a staircase, but it went down, further than the foundation should allow. I threw a chair down to see how far. "I never heard it hit the bottom," I shivered. "Did you go down?" A long pause. Then, "He wants me to." The sound of static rose through the line, swelling like a tide. Buried inside it, I heard faint whispers. My own name, my own voice. "Don't go," I begged him. "Please, just stay where you are. Stay in one room until help arrives." "Help won't find me," he said. "Not anymore. The house isn't on the street you think it is. It's not on any street at all." I tried to tell myself it was metaphor, delusion, but his next words crushed that hope. I checked the front door again. I thought maybe if I opened it, I'd see the yard, the road, anything familiar, but it wasn't outside. It was another me, another house. I was looking at myself through the glass. Only that version of me was smiling. My throat closed. I didn't know what to say. He whispered, almost childlike. "Tell me the truth. If I step through, am I leaving or arriving?" The line warped. I thought I heard him screaming, but it was faint, distant, like it came from several miles away and several inches from my ear at the same time. Then silence. I stared at the call log on my screen, the number still glowing. I knew if I pressed redial, something would answer. But I couldn't bring myself to try. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't stop listening to the quiet hum of the dispatch floor, wondering if it was hiding another voice beneath it. He called again 2 nights later. This time, his words came out in gasps. "There's something wrong with the mirrors," he said. "They don't show me anymore. They show the house. The walls stretching, bending, folding in on themselves." I looked into the bathroom mirror and I saw the staircase behind me, the one that shouldn't exist. When I turned, there was nothing there. But in the mirror, it kept going. He was crying now. I think he lives in the reflection. He's waiting for me to follow him in. Every time I blink, the glass ripples like water. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to tear the headset off and never hear his voice again. But I couldn't. Because I needed to know. "What happens if you touch it?" I asked. Another pause. Then a whisper. "It feels like skin." The line dropped again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every reflective surface in my apartment felt wrong. My TV screen when it was off, the dark sheen of the window, even the black surface of my phone. I draped towels over everything I could, but it didn't help. I still felt watched. The next evening, when his number lit up again, I hesitated. I thought maybe if I didn't answer, it would end. But my hand moved on its own. His voice came through instantly, urgent, panicked. "They're not calls anymore," he said. "They're doors. Every time I speak to you, I get pulled further in. I can feel the distance stretch between my words and your ears. He's listening too. He's learning how to sound like me." Static rose again, harsh and violent. Beneath it, I heard my own voice. "Hey, Evan, what's your emergency?" The man screamed. The line went dead. And for the first time, I saw something flicker in the darkened monitor on my desk. Just for a second, a face. My face. Smiling. The last time he called, I almost didn't recognize his voice. It had grown thin, ragged, stretched out like a rubber band pulled too far. When the number lit up on my screen, my stomach sank. I had spent days hoping the calls were over, that he had disappeared for good, even if that meant something terrible had happened. At least then it would be finished. But the red glow of his line burned like a wound that refused to close. My headset felt heavier than usual when I answered. "1, what's your emergency?" There was no pause this time. No hesitation. His voice spilled through immediately. "He's speaking with me," he said. His words were flat, drained of all the frantic energy they used to carry. Not just watching anymore. Not just moving things around. "He talks now," I swallowed. "What does he say?" There was a sound on the other end, not quite laughter, but not crying either. A low, broken noise. "He says everything you say," he whispered. "But he says it before you do, like he already knows. Like he's been waiting to speak with me and you were just practice." A chill crawled up my spine. My throat tightened around words I couldn't find. The line crackled, heavy with static. For a second I thought it had dropped, but then I heard it. My own voice. Not a recording. Not an echo. My exact voice, tone for tone, inflection for inflection. "Mine 1, what's your emergency?" It asked, but I hadn't said it. I tore the headset away from my ear, heart slamming in my chest. My supervisor glanced over, frowning, but I couldn't explain. I pressed the receiver back to my head with a shaking hand. "Who is that?" I demanded. The man on the line gave a small, broken laugh. "That's him. That's how he sounds now. He learned it from you. I couldn't breathe. You mean he sounds like me? He is you, the man said. He's been answering me too. Sometimes I don't know which of you I'm talking to. Sometimes you both speak at once. Sometimes you argue. I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles white. What does he want? The man's breathing grew uneven. His words came out in short, desperate bursts. He says he's already inside. Not just the house. Not just the mirrors, inside me. Every time I speak, I hear him in my mouth. Every word tastes like his. Static swallowed his voice, then gave way to mine again, except it wasn't me. Stay calm, it said. The same calm tone I always used at the start of every call. Stay calm, help is on the way, but no call operator says that. Not unless we know it's true. And it wasn't. The man let out a sharp cry. Don't believe him. That's not you. That's not... The sound cut. His voice fractured mid-sentence, breaking into shards of words. A scream buried inside a laugh, a sob hidden inside a whisper. The line shook with noise, until I couldn't tell which voice belonged to him, which to me, and which to the thing between us. And then silence. I thought the call had ended, but the line was still open. I could hear faint breathing. I whispered, "Are you there?" A beat of silence. Then my own voice answered, "Yes." I ripped the headset off again, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to throw it across the room, but the number was still glowing red on my screen, waiting for me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I forced myself to pick it up once more. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice cracked. "What are you?" The answer came without hesitation. "I'm the one who listens. I'm the one who repeats. I'm the one you let in when you answered." The voice was mine, but it wasn't. Too smooth. Too calm. Like every flaw had been sanded off until it was nothing but perfect mimicry. I tried to hang up. I pressed the button over and over, but the line stayed open. The glowing number refused to fade. Then I heard the man again, faint, begging. "Please, make it stop. He won't leave. He's everywhere. He's in the air, in the walls, in my skin. He's in you too. Can't you feel it?" I shook my head, though no one could see. "No," I whispered. "You're hallucinating. You're sick. You need help." But even as I said it, I felt the lie tremble in my chest, because I had heard it. I had heard the voice before my own words left my mouth. Static swallowed us again. This time, when it cleared, I heard both of us speaking at once, the man and I overlapping, stumbling over the same words. "What's your emergency?" 911, what's your emergency?" The sound repeated, twisted, folding in on itself until it became a chant. The man screamed. The line erupted in violent noise. And then, nothing. The call dropped. The number disappeared from my screen. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the blank monitor. My headset hung useless around my neck. I waited for the number to light up again, for the voice to return. But the call never came back. Not that night. Not the night after. Not ever again. And yet, sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I hear it anyway. The faint click of a phone connecting. The soft hum of static. And then my own voice whispering from the dark. "Wevin, what's your emergency?"